Hi everyone, we hope you're doing well. We're hanging in there though honestly, we haven't been getting much sleep lately. Today, we want to answer a question we get a lot: how do we publish our audiobooks? First, we post most audiobooks on Patreon as paid content. They stay paid for a few months. After that, they become free to listen to on Patreon forever. A few weeks later, we post them on other places like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, X. Lately, things have been a bit slow in terms of new members. So we'd love your help. Please share our site with your friends or in places like Facebook groups, Twitter, X, Discord, Reddit, or novel forums. Even one share can really help us grow. Thanks so much for your support. Having grasped a rough idea of what Setsuna had in mind, Kotonoha looked at her again with eyes now tinged with a more complicated emotion. Though she had little experience when it came to love, Setsuna's words weren't exactly hard to understand. And now that she did understand what was being implied, Kotonoha found her impression of Setsuna quietly shifting. That day, I actually considered asking you to join us too. Chapter 145, when your mom's watching back then, if Mai hadn't returned home early. With Kotonoha's gentle and compliant nature, it really wasn't impossible that a few whispered words from Setsuna could have pushed things past the point of no return. Recalling that day, Kotonoha pressed her lips together tightly. Have you ever thought about dating someone, Kotonoha? Setsuna didn't linger on the previous topic. She casually shifted the conversation, as if it were just a normal chat. Kotonoha, still lost in her own memories, looked at the girl beside her but didn't immediately respond. I don't know. It was undeniable Kotonoha had top grades, a stunning appearance, and the grace and background of a perfect young lady. To most of the boys at school, she was nothing short of a goddess. But only those who truly knew her understood how submissive and reserved she really was. Even when she had her own opinions, she rarely asserted them. Especially in social situations, she tended to simply follow the lead of whoever she was talking to. That kind of personality made Setsuna worry. In the right circumstances. At the right time. She feared Kotonoha might end up being taken by Haruto. Without ever making a real decision herself. Rather than letting things spiral into something unpredictable, Setsuna would rather keep everything under control from the start. It's not like I haven't thought about it. I just don't have that kind of mindset right now. Maybe when I get to college, I'll think more seriously about it. When she noticed Setsuna suddenly go quiet, Kotonoha grew uneasy, thinking her vague answer had disappointed her. She quickly added a clarification, glancing at Setsuna to gauge her reaction. But Setsuna wasn't sure how to respond to Kotonoha's overly cautious tone. College. The last person who told her they'd think about love after college. Well, no one knew better than her how that ended. Coming tomorrow? After tidying up his room, Harut realized he had absolutely nothing else to do. He ended up sitting at his desk, adjusting the position of his pen holder 10 times in a row before finally pulling out his phone and messaging Mitsuha, who was still far away in Itamari. He had assumed that Mitsuha, in her usual impulsive fashion, would drag their mom and Yotsuya straight to Tokyo that very night. But surprisingly, she held back, which genuinely shocked him. "You're not leaving tonight?" he texted. "I'm not that impatient," Mitsuha replied. She was clearly bluffing. Her original plan was to hop on the bus that evening, but their mom, Futaba, rejected the idea on the spot. "Is it just you and Mom coming?" "Yeah. We were going to bring Yotsuya too, but when we made the decision, she refused. Said she wanted to stay in Itamori and keep Grandma company. She'll come visit another time." "Taking care of Grandma, huh? As her older sister, maybe you should learn a thing or two from Yotsuya," says the guy who ran off without a word. "Won't Grandma come to Tokyo with you? With 5 people? No way your place could fit all of us. Plus, long-distance travel would be hard on Grandma." As soon as I suggested it, Mom shut it down. Tired from standing, Mitsuha flopped to the floor with her phone in hand. She gazed out the window at the dusky sky, heart fluttering with anticipation. Tomorrow, she'd finally leave home and head for Tokyo, a place that, until now, had only existed in her dreams. A place totally different from her small-town life. A place full of bright lights, opportunities, and mystery. "Is Tokyo really that amazing?" she asked. "Huh?" Haruto blinked, caught off guard by the sudden question. "You've always looked forward to being in Tokyo, becoming one of those cool Tokyo guys. Don't get cocky," she huffed. "Just 'cause you got there first. When I arrive tomorrow, you better watch yourself." "What time are you leaving tomorrow?" "Morning. Then you'll get here in the afternoon. I'll come pick you guys up then. Talk to you later." After hanging up, he sat in silence for a moment. Tomorrow, Mitsuha and his mother would be arriving in Tokyo. He hadn't seen them in what felt like forever. But this time, they weren't the same people from his original timeline. They were still in their younger forms, Mitsuha still in middle school, And his mom still youthful. His calm heart started to beat faster with nervous excitement. The sky had gone completely dark by the time Haruto arrived at the Kira household. While helping Mai prepare dinner, he casually mentioned his family's upcoming visit. Mai, in the middle of slicing green peppers, froze. She nearly cut her finger, but thankfully caught herself in time. Slowly, she turned toward him, her eyes focused and intense. "What's wrong?" he asked, noticing her stare while adjusting the stove's heat. "Your family. You mean your sister?" "No, not just Mitsuha. My mom's coming too. They'll arrive tomorrow afternoon." "You never mentioned this before." "I only just confirmed it myself just a little while ago." Mai opened her mouth as if to speak but hesitated. She looked down at the chopping board and resumed slicing peppers, now much more slowly. "Do you want me to come with you to pick them up?" "No need. I'll go alone. As for meeting them, we'll see how things go." Haruto wasn't sure whether letting Mai meet his mom, Mamazu Futaba, was a good idea. He had no idea if his mom would sense something unusual in Mai's behavior or attitude. "Does Setsuna know?" Mai asked. "I told you first." Later, while sitting at the dinner table, both he and Mai glanced toward Setsuna, who showed no reaction upon hearing that his family was coming to Tokyo the next day. They had both expected her to stay calm, but when they actually saw her calm, almost indifferent expression, they still couldn't help but exchange glances. Their eyes silently said the same thing, just as expected. "Do you have anything going on tomorrow, Setsuna?" he asked. "Not really. Wanna come with me to the station?" He had declined Mai's offer because he was worried his mom might pick up on their intimate relationship. But with Setsuna, there was no need for that kind of concern. They were close in age, and she was his official girlfriend. His mom could interpret it however she liked, it wouldn't be a problem. They had even talked in the past about meeting each other's families. This was the perfect opportunity. "Tomorrow." Setsuna looked hesitant, as if something was bothering her. But when her eyes met Haruto's, her worries seemed to fade, and she gradually nodded. "My mom's really gentle. She'll definitely love someone as sweet as you. As for Mitsuha, she's a bit loud, but she's kind at heart." They had talked about his sisters before, Mitsuha and Yotsuha, but he rarely mentioned his mother. Now that they had time, he shared more details about his family with both Setsuna and Mai, hoping to help them avoid any surprises. He ended up staying at the Kira residence until after 10 p.m. telling them everything about his family. It wasn't until then that Mai realized the boy in front of her came from a far more complicated background than she'd initially assumed. "You never mentioned any of this before," Mai said, gazing at Haruto. She'd heard him speak about his family before, but only in passing, never in detail. Until now, she hadn't even known what they did for a living. And now she found out his family ran a shrine. And his father was even the mayor. "It's not really something worth bragging about," Haruto replied, his voice casual. "I mean, do you really expect me to go around telling people, 'Hey, my dad's the mayor'?" Mai wanted to argue but found herself at a loss for words. She sighed and stared at him for a long time. Her gaze lingered until he began to feel a little uncomfortable, and only then did she finally look away. "You should get some rest," she said softly. "Tomorrow afternoon, we'll head to the station together." He nodded at Setsuna, who stood quietly nearby, and got to his feet. "It's getting late. I should head back. They'll probably contact me before they arrive. I'll come find you then." "Okay." After confirming the plan for tomorrow, he left the Kira household and returned to his apartment. He went straight to the bathroom, carefully washing himself clean. After blow-drying his hair, he collapsed into bed. It was already past 11. He glanced at the time on his phone, closed his eyes, and quickly drifted into sleep. He couldn't quite remember what he dreamed of that night, just a vague, uneasy feeling remained. As he opened his eyes and looked out toward the window, he saw the sky outside was bright and blue. A beautiful day. Still in his pajamas, Haruto glanced at the clock on his desk. Just past 8. He closed his eyes and exhaled deeply before making his way to the bathroom. After taking care of his hygiene and grabbing a quick breakfast, he sat down at his desk. His thoughts drifted a bit, but it wasn't enough to keep him from writing. With nothing else on his schedule, he picked up his pen and continued working quietly until a message arrived around 10 a.m. Mitsuha and the others had just boarded the Shinkansen. Since Itamari didn't have a direct bullet train line to Tokyo, they had to transfer at Nagoya. From there, the ride to Tokyo would take roughly 2 hours. He figured if they got on the train at 10, they'd likely arrive around noon. He set his pen down, tidied up his appearance in the mirror, and headed out for the Kira household. Even Setsuna, usually calm and collected, couldn't help but feel a little anxious about meeting Haruto's family. She hadn't gotten much sleep the night before and had woken up around 7. For hours she stayed in her room, trying on different outfits, repeatedly checking her reflection before finally settling on a light blue dress. Even then, she still felt nervous. When the doorbell rang, she stepped out of her room and saw Haruto already inside, chatting with her mother. She hesitated for a moment before slowly walking over to his side. "Haruto." He turned at the sound of her voice and saw her standing there in her blue dress. "It suits you," he said. The unease that had been weighing on Setsuna's heart disappeared instantly. "Are we leaving now?" They just got on the train in Nagoya. It'll take them a while to get to Tokyo. If we leave now and take the subway, we should get there around the same time. So, should we go? Yeah. Haruto gave a small nod, then looked over at Mai. "I'll head out with Setsuna now. We should be back by noon, maybe 1 in the afternoon. We'll probably eat out for lunch." "Well then, looks like I'll have the house to myself for lunch," Mai said with a smile. "Setsuna, be polite when you meet his family." She knew her daughter didn't need the reminder, but still couldn't help saying it. Setsuna gave a small nod and glanced back at her mother. Meanwhile, back in Itamari, Mitsuo had been up early as well. She stood in front of her wardrobe, frowning. All her clothes looked too plain. She sighed, regretting not buying a new outfit in advance. After much internal debate, she finally picked something she could live with and started packing again. She had already packed most of her things last night, but somehow it felt like a lot was still missing. Now that she was awake and still had time before leaving, she hurriedly stuffed a few more things into her bag. So loud. Still lying in bed and trying to enjoy her vacation, Yatsuo was finally jolted awake by her sister's noisy footsteps. She sat up with a glare and snapped, "Seriously? Can't you be quiet?" "Ah, sorry." Mitsuo replied sheepishly. "I'm just finishing my packing." "Didn't you already do that last night? You were up so late even Grandma yelled at you. Now you're at it again?" "I tried packing last night, but it wasn't finished. We're leaving soon, of course I have to make sure I've got everything." Now wide awake and annoyed, Yatsuo sat grumpily on her bed. There was no chance of falling back asleep, so she begrudgingly got dressed and got up. "You know, if you change your mind, you could still come with us to Tokyo," Mitsuo teased. "You could see your beloved big brother again, Humphrey." "I'm not interested in Tokyo. I'll go another time. Besides, I don't want to be like someone who mumbles hee Tokyo, my lovely Tokyo, in her sleep like a total weirdo. I couldn't even sleep properly with all your creepy dreaming." "Did I really say that?" Mitsuo froze, her face blank with shock. Hearing her sister's teasing words, she slowly turned red with embarrassment, realizing how ridiculous and possibly real that had sounded. Although she really longed to go to Tokyo, there were still some lines she refused to cross and at least a shred of shame left in her. Yatsuo didn't answer Mitsuo. She quietly pulled her shirt over her head, lifted the futon, picked up the denim shorts lying beside the bed, and slid them over her pink strawberry print panties. Then she pulled on her white socks and stood up. "I'll go make breakfast. Do you have anything you want me to give that guy?" "I can take it for you, I already gave it to Mom." "Huh? Why not give it to me?" Feeling betrayed by her sister's lack of trust, Mitsuo was just about to demand an explanation when Yatsuo had already slid open the paper door and walked out of the room, leaving her alone. Watching her little sister leave, Mitsuo pouted, then resumed packing. When Yatsuo arrived in the living room, 2 early risers were already there. One was sipping tea while watching the morning news, and the other was busy preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Grandma, Mom. You're up. Where's Mitsuo?" Mimizu Hitoa, her hair soft white and thick glasses perched on her nose, looked up from the news and turned to her granddaughter as she asked about Mitsuo. "She's still packing. She'll be out soon. I'll help with breakfast, Mom." "I'd appreciate that, Yatsuo." Futaba, who was cooking breakfast, smiled gently at her daughter and didn't turn down the offer. Together, they got to work. Watching the warm, intimate interaction between mother and daughter, then glancing toward the bedroom, Hitoa shook her head softly, thinking of Mitsuo still cooped up in there. She woke up at 6 but only came out of her room at 7. In the end, it was only Yatsuo's calls that managed to drag Mitsuo out. Reluctantly, she stepped into the living room and quietly sat down beside the others, where breakfast was already set on the table. "How's the packing going?" There are still a few things I wanted to bring to Tokyo, but it seems there's no more room, so I gave up on them." Answering her mother's question, Mitsuo picked up a piece of grilled fish and placed it in her mouth. "You're only going for 2 days this time." "I know." Hitoa said nothing more, simply continued eating in silence. Yatsuo, for her part, didn't even look at her sister and quietly focused on her meal. By the time it was 8 o'clock, Futaba and Mitsuo were ready to go. They got into a car sent by Mimizu Toshiki's driver and headed straight for Nagoya Station, where they boarded the Shinkansen bound for Tokyo. Meanwhile, at Tokyo Station, Having taken the subway from Korakuen Station, Haruto and Setsuna didn't wait directly inside the terminal. Since they still had some time to spare, they strolled through Chiyoda District, a short but pleasant date. By 11:30, they were back at Tokyo Station, waiting quietly. "We've arrived." The first thing that came was a text message. Seeing it was from his mom, Haruto immediately called her. "Haruto? Yeah, it's me. I'm already inside the station. I'm wearing a black sweater and jeans, and the girl next to me is in a light blue dress." "Your girlfriend?" "Yeah." "Wait a second. You came with your girlfriend?" As Futaba spoke, Mitsuo's shocked voice could be heard in the background, probably on speakerphone. "Your brother's wearing a black sweater and jeans. His girlfriend is in a light blue dress. Help me look for them, okay?" "No need, they're right in front of us." Amidst the noisy station, Mitsuo had apparently spotted them first. Haruto, still scanning the crowd for his family, was having a hard time with all the people swarming in during the May holiday rush. Beside him, Setsuna suddenly clutched his left arm tightly. She was visibly nervous now. She was about to meet Haruto's mother and sister for the first time. Her lips pressed into a thin line, her complexion pale with tension. He felt the pressure on his arm and glanced down at her, offering quiet reassurance. "Relax. I'm proud to have you as my girlfriend." Looking up into his calm, steady eyes, she felt her anxiety ease just a little. But just then, "I can't take this. Damn it, how can a guy like him have such a cute girlfriend?" A familiar voice rang out. Turning toward it, Haruto finally spotted the Mitsuo dragging a huge suitcase, and beside her, his mother giving him a smile. Chapter 146, Karamai, should I meet Haruto's mother? It was quite a surprise for Haruto to be caught by his mother, watching him talk sweetly to a girl. He felt a bit surprised inside, but there was no real awkwardness or embarrassment. Instead, under the watchful gaze of Futaba and Mitsuba, he extended his hand and gently took Setsuna's hand. Oh, seeing this, Mitsuo, who was holding a suitcase, covered her face with her left hand, unable to speak due to the embarrassing sight. Meanwhile, Futaba, standing beside her, watched her son and the girl beside him with calm eyes, her expression warm as she looked at them. "Welcome to Tokyo, Mom. I didn't really plan on coming to Tokyo," said Futaba, her voice soft. Mitsuo wanted to come on her own, but then something came up that required my attention. "So, I decided to come see how you're doing here as well. Is there something you need to take care of?" "Well, it's a matter for adults, something that doesn't concern you for now. When the time's right, I'll tell you about it. By the way, you must be Setsuna, right?" Futaba's pure, water-like gaze shifted toward the young girl standing beside her son. Her eyes lingered on Setsuna for a moment, and a hint of surprise flashed across Futaba's face. "Yes, I'm Kira Setsuna. It's nice to meet you, Auntie." Setsuna hesitated for a moment, slightly troubled by the title of Auntie for Haruto's mother. She wasn't sure how to address her properly. After a moment of indecision, she chose the most respectful term she could think of, hoping that the woman wouldn't dislike her. Futaba looked at the petite girl in front of her, who was much smaller than her own son, and couldn't help but smile as she glanced at Haruto. Seeing that her son's gaze was on her, Futaba gave him a gentle nod and smiled back. "I'm Mimizu Futaba, Haruto's mother. I really appreciate you looking out for him during his time in Tokyo. I hope you will continue to take care of him." When Setsuna saw Futaba bowing slightly and greeting, she became flustered and hurriedly returned the gesture, her cheeks reddening. Mitsuo, standing beside Futaba, glanced over at Setsuna, her eyes narrowing with a look of disapproval. She then turned away, not wanting to deal with the situation. Haruto squeezed Setsuna's hand, urging her to stand up. Setsuna, who had been nervously looking at her future in-laws and the girl who might one day be her sister, hesitated for a moment before standing tall. "Since you've come all the way from Itamori to Tokyo, you must be tired. Why don't we find a place to sit and have some lunch? Afterward, we can head to my apartment to rest." Futaba, as a mother, was more interested in seeing where her son lived, but when she looked at her daughter, Mitsuo's eager expression made her smile helplessly, and she agreed with Haruto's suggestion. "I'm fine with that, but what about the luggage? There are luggage lockers nearby. We can leave the bags there for now. Let's go." Haruto, still holding Setsuna's hand, led his mother and sister through the station, preparing to take the subway to Shibuya. There was a nice restaurant at Hikari in Shibuya, and he was planning to take his family there for lunch. Futaba and Mitsuo, unfamiliar with Tokyo, silently followed Haruto as they made their way to the station. Mitsuo, pretending to be nonchalant, was trying to blend in with the bustling crowd, but there were just too many people who looked like her, and she didn't stand out at all. While carrying her suitcase, Futaba reached out and took Mitsuo's free hand. Mitsuo resisted a bit but didn't dare to refuse her mother, quietly following Futaba as they bought their tickets and boarded the subway. "How are your grades now that I'm not at home? I just got to Tokyo. Can we not talk about such boring stuff right now? I'm more interested in how you ended up with such a cute girlfriend." Sitting next to Futaba, Haruto gave his sister an amused glance. As much as Futaba was curious, she was too reserved to ask her son directly. She glanced at Mitsuo again, then sighed and closed her eyes, listening to the sound of the subway. Satsuna, who hadn't really interacted much with Mitsuo, was worried that her boyfriend's younger sister might dislike her. However, when Mitsuo smiled at her, she couldn't help but feel a little more at ease. "Do you really want to know about my relationship with Satsuna?" "Not really, I guess." Seeing Haruto's smile, Mitsuo suddenly became alert. She sensed that if she kept asking, things might get awkward, so she immediately dropped the subject. "Well, that's too bad." He didn't show any regret, and Mitsuo turned her attention away, looking at the subway car's interior, closing her eyes and trying to take in the sounds of the city. The subway ride didn't take long, about 10 minutes, and they arrived at Shibuya Station. He led his family to the luggage lockers to leave their bags, then guided them to the restaurant. Mitsuo, dazzled by all the stores and advertisements, looked pleased as she followed her brother. Futaba, on the other hand, glanced around thoughtfully, her mind elsewhere. Haruto held Satsuna's hand, and though Satsuna was unsure and slightly worried, she followed him and his family through the crowds and into the dining area. Shibuya Hikari, located in the Shibuya district of Tokyo, was a large commercial complex with shopping centers, office buildings, parking, and more. The dining area on the 6th and 7th floors was home to some of the most famous restaurants in Shibuya, offering a wide variety of cuisine. Futaba and Mitsuo, still unfamiliar with the area, couldn't help but be impressed. Haruto, knowing that his family might not be used to Western cuisine, chose a traditional Japanese restaurant where everyone could feel more comfortable. After a short wait, they were seated in a private room. He handed the menu to his mother and sister, and another one to Satsuna, who sat beside him. "Here's the menu. Feel free to order whatever you like. Don't worry about the price," he said as he smiled reassuringly. Mitsuo glanced at the menu nervously, her eyes immediately falling to the prices. Seeing the high costs, she looked at her mother's face, hoping to see a sign of concern. Futaba, however, was calm, having seen the prices as soon as they entered the restaurant. She had dined in places like this before when she was younger, so the price didn't faze her. Looking at the prices on the menu in front of her, which were clearly not within the usual budget range, Mitsuo glanced again at her calm older brother. He didn't seem to show any signs of hesitation or unease at all because of the prices. Added to what Haruto had said earlier, that there was no need to worry about the expenses, Mitsuo resumed looking at the menu. "Why is Mom reacting so calmly? Did she already know about this?" "No. If she knew about this kind of spending, she definitely wouldn't have come here." Then, Mitsuo thought that maybe her mom planned to pay for everything later instead of her older brother, which gradually put her mind at ease. She quietly focused on the dishes on the menu. Since neither of the two above seemed concerned about the price, what was there for her to worry about? Just order and be done with it. Looking at the menu, Mitsuo mentally noted what she wanted to order, while Satsuna, sitting next to Haruto, was slightly surprised. She hadn't expected him to bring his family to such a place for a meal. The prices are a bit high. But it wasn't too much of an issue. She had brought her wallet with her today, and she didn't usually have much to spend. She probably had around 70 to 80,000 yen. If Haruto's wasn't enough, she could help out. Unaware of the other three's thoughts, Haruto was focused on the menu, carefully considering his options. It wasn't about worrying about the cost, he was just thinking about which dishes would be the best. Having received a funding from a rich woman, along with his own balance, he still had about 300,000 yen. Even if the four of them ate freely today, the total cost would probably only be around 40 to 50,000 yen, so there was no need to worry about the payment. In the silence, Haruto had nearly decided, so he turned to Satsuna, asking if she had made up her mind. The girl nodded lightly. "Are you ready to order?" "If there's no problem, I'll go ahead and order." "Mitsuo, have you decided?" "Done. Then I'll order." Seeing that everyone had made their choices, Haruto pressed the service bell. Soon, the sound of footsteps approached, and the waiter entered the room to take their orders. After hearing the orders from the other three, Haruto noticed that even Mitsuo had ordered relatively modestly. As the last to order, and considering everyone's appetites, he didn't add anything extra. He simply ordered sushi and a hot pot, and then finished ordering. During the waiting time for the meal, the four sat quietly in the private room, chatting about everyday matters. There's no need to worry too much about life. How's school been for you? Since she thought that Satsuna and Haruto were from the same school, Futaba didn't think too much before asking him about his school life. As for school, everyone is really nice, and we get along pretty well. I've made a few friends, and life there isn't much different from when I was in Itamori. The workload is manageable, and if there's anything I don't understand, I can always discuss it with Setsuna when I get home. At home? Aren't you two in the same class? Mitsuha took a sip of her tea and looked up, still thinking that Setsuna and her older brother were in the same class. No, where? Not in the same school. Eh? Not in the same school? She looked at Haruto, trying to get some clarity. I met Setsuna because we live near each other, not because we're at the same school. She's at Sakekino, and I'm at Toyosaki. The two schools are in opposite directions, and we don't even take the same route to school. We only see each other after school. Not knowing what kind of school Sakekino was, Mitsuha understood from Haruto's explanation that they weren't in the same school. Futaba was also a little surprised. She had assumed that the two of them were at the same school, but it turned out they went to different schools. This meant they probably didn't get to spend much time together on weekdays. Mitsuha, who had more questions, fell silent as soon as she understood that Setsuna and Haruto weren't at the same school. Her gaze drifted off as if lost in thought. The sudden quietness at the table made Haruto break the silence by asking about home matters like Mitsuha's school and how their grandmother was doing. They exchanged a bit more conversation to let Setsuna get to know more about his family. About half an hour later, the dishes began to arrive at the table, one after another. Mitsuha's eyes sparkled as she stared at the exquisite dishes. If this were the time of high-performance smartphones, she would have likely taken out her phone by now, snapping pictures from all angles and posting them online. When the food arrived, everyone quietly started eating their meals. Even Mitsuha, who usually had a more energetic personality, sat properly at the table, eating with a rare sense of decorum. It seemed that during her time away from home, Mitsuha had been taught a thing or two by her grandmother and mother. At the table, Haruto seemed the most natural of all, simply focusing on his meal, making the entire room feel peaceful and quiet. While eating, Haruto didn't dwell too much on anything. His mind was nearly empty as he slowly ate, watching his food disappear. Then, he felt a gentle nudge on his leg. Without even needing to look down, he could already guess who it was. Glancing at Mitsuha, who was sitting diagonally across from him, he saw her with her head lowered, appearing to focus on her meal, but her eyes were slyly glancing at him. After meeting his gaze, she threw him 2 quick glances and then looked away. Her eyes clearly said, "Look down." Having grown up together, they had a certain unspoken understanding. Haruto lowered his head slowly and saw a light yellow wallet, which had been kicked to his feet. He stared at it for a moment before looking back at his sister, but Mitsuha didn't lift her head. Could it be her feet smell? Haruto thought for a moment, but smiled and stretched down to pick up the wallet. He flicked it toward her with a small motion, giving her a glance that clearly said, "No need." Mitsuha, who had been rejected despite her small act of kindness, chewed a piece of grilled meat angrily and lowered her head, ignoring him. Noticing the odd interaction, Setsuna observed the exchange between the siblings, sensing some hidden message, but not fully understanding their quiet communication. She could only silently watch their little exchange. After they finished eating and took a short break, they prepared to head to the counter to pay. Haruto noticed his leg being gently shaken and turned to find Setsuna offering him her wallet. Haruto, feeling as if he had been assumed to be incapable of paying, fell silent for a moment before gently pushing the wallet back toward her, signaling that he could handle it on his own. Setsuna hesitated for a moment, but eventually chose to trust him, quietly lowering her head to put the wallet back in her bag. To avoid the possibility of his mother trying to pay on his behalf out of consideration, he excused himself to the restroom and quietly left the private room. He settled the bill in full, took the receipt, and returned to his seat without saying a word. He made sure to casually let his mother see the receipt just enough for her to notice so she wouldn't sneak off later to try and cover the cost herself. When Mimizu Futaba saw Haruto come back holding the receipt, any thoughts she had about secretly paying vanished on the spot. Meanwhile, Mitsuha had gone to retrieve her luggage from the storage locker. With everything ready, she joined Haruto, Setsuna, and her mother. Together, the group got back on the subway, heading toward Korakuen Station. After walking a bit, they finally arrived at Haruto's apartment. "My mom's waiting at home. I'll head back for now," Setsuna said, coming to a stop just before they reached the building. "All right. I'll contact you after everything's settled," Haruto replied. Setsuna nodded. She knew the size of his apartment well. 3 people could manage, barely, but adding a 4th would make it way too cramped. She'd already met his family, so there was no need to tag along and crowd the space. Besides, it had been a long time since Haruto had seen his family. They deserved a moment alone. After thinking it through, Setsuna decided to leave. She said her goodbyes to Mitsuha and Futaba, then turned and walked in the opposite direction, away from his apartment. Watching Setsuna leave, Mitsuo looked a bit surprised. When she turned to her brother, she saw that both he and their mother were already climbing the stairs. She quickly grabbed her suitcase and hurried after them. The stairs were tough with luggage in tow, but Haruto glanced back and gave her a hand. "You really brought this much? I can't wear the same clothes every day, can I? And I brought some local specialties from home, as a gift from Grandma. Oh, and Yotsuya sent you a little something too." "A gift?" Mitsuo just gave him a mysterious smile and didn't elaborate. When they reached the door of the apartment, Haruto unlocked it, and Mitsuo immediately darted inside, leaving her suitcase at the entrance. Watching her charge straight into the room, he turned to his mother with a helpless look. Futaba let out a sigh, but didn't comment. Once he brought the suitcase inside, she slowly stepped into the apartment, taking in the place her son had been living in while in Tokyo. Futaba had always trusted her son. She believed that even alone in Tokyo, he would be able to take care of himself. And now, seeing the neat and tidy apartment, her faith was reaffirmed. "Looks like you're doing fine on your own. I didn't want you guys to worry, so I've been careful to stay on top of everything." Satisfied with what she saw, Futaba gave a small nod, clearly relieved. But Mitsuo, now fully at ease, was already exploring the room like an inspector. "This is totally different from home in Itamari. But isn't it a little too bare? Just a few books on the desk, nothing else. Haven't you been bored living like this? Not even any manga? Wait, oh, there's one magazine. The one you mailed back home. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, back already?" asked Mai, seated on the living room sofa. She had spent the entire morning deep in thought over something rather complicated. Upon hearing the door open and seeing her daughter return home, she asked a question that didn't really need an answer. "Yeah," Setsuna replied. "Looks like you made a good impression. You seem to be in a great mood." Mai sat up straighter and looked at her daughter, finally asking the question she'd been pondering all morning, something that had been weighing on her mind. "So? What kind of person is Haruto's mother?" Chapter 147, Tokyo University is just a small place, not worth mentioning because of the holiday. Mai spent the whole day at home. Deep down, she'd considered heading to Tokyo Station to join her daughter in welcoming Haruto's family, but guilt held her back. She was well aware of the inappropriate relationship between herself and Haruto. The thought of facing his mother filled her with unease. Would that woman be able to sense something she shouldn't? Torn by these complicated feelings, she ultimately chose not to go. Now that her daughter had returned, however, she couldn't help but ask about Haruto's family. Having left the house in the morning and only returned in the late afternoon, Setsuna felt drained, not physically, but mentally. She had remained fully alert the entire time, knowing she was meeting people important to someone she cared about. Now back home, the moment she relaxed, fatigue washed over her. Without saying a word to the mother seated on the sofa with a remote in hand, she headed straight for her room. Door opens. Door closes. Left alone in the living room, Mai frowned at her daughter's aloof behavior. She set down the remote and got up, making her way to Setsuna's door. The moment she opened it, she caught sight of her daughter changing, slipping out of her dress and into the more comfortable loungewear she usually wore at home. Setsuna walked past her mother as if nothing had happened, taking a seat in the living room. "Haruto's little sister is pretty lively, but she's sweet," Setsuna began. "His mom." She paused. Her silence made Mai raise an eyebrow, suspicion creeping onto her face. "His mom looks elegant and graceful. She speaks gently too. A truly admirable woman." "What, am I not admirable?" Veins popped on Mai's forehead. She reached out and grabbed Setsuna's cheeks, pulling and squishing them with a grumble of irritation. "Mm." Setsuna groaned helplessly until her mother finally vented all her frustration. Once freed, she rubbed her sore cheeks. "When do you plan to meet her? Since you're back, does that mean they're in Haruto's apartment now?" Mai glanced in the direction of Haruto's apartment and let out a sigh. Meeting his family was inevitable, but the when of it all still made her uneasy. She was a grown woman, a mother, no less, but at this moment, her heart felt oddly unsettled. Even when facing her own family, she never felt this conflicted. "We'll deal with it when the time comes," she muttered. She ignored her daughter's subtle look and leaned back on the couch, like a soldier finally laying down her arms. Meanwhile, Mitsuo couldn't stay still. Her brother's apartment was a new world for her. She'd examined every corner, and now stood out on the balcony, gazing at the surrounding buildings and apartments with a gleam in her eye. This is the big city. A real, bustling metropolis. There's a convenience store right there, so different from Itamari. Back home, it takes at least half an hour just to get to the nearest store. Her eyes sparkled as she soaked in the view. Even the vending machine at the corner brought back memories how she and Yotsuya used to treat the one back in town like a makeshift cafe. Compared to that, This was paradise. This really is the big city. She stood in silence for a while, then wandered back inside with a sigh. She spotted their mom checking the fridge while Haruto sat at his desk. "Isn't this room a bit small?" Mitsuo asked. "Wait, don't tell me I have to sleep in here with you tonight?" "No way. Sorry to disappoint, but there's only one bed. We'll have to make do with futons on the floor." "Unbelievable. Hey, you've got a part-time job or something, right? Since you're earning money, why not get me and Mom a nice room at some fancy hotel with an ocean view? I can already see it sipping wine at night, gazing at the lights over Tokyo Bay." As Mitsuo hugged herself and drifted into her luxurious fantasy, Haruto couldn't bring himself to pop her bubble. He left his desk and walked over to their mother by the fridge. "Something wrong?" he asked. Futaba turned to look at her son and smiled gently. "I was just checking whether you've been paying attention to your diet. I know you're not like Mitsuo, you're usually careful about nutrition. But living alone, I do worry. Do you resort to quick meals because of your busy school schedule?" "You mean like instant noodles?" "Exactly. And other fast food. Life in the big city is convenient, but it's easy to lose yourself. If it had been any ordinary teenage boy fresh from the countryside, perhaps that would be a concern. But Haruto had lived in the city for over 10 years. He wasn't like those naive kids. "I don't always have time to cook, true. So I often eat at Setsuna's place." "Oh? Sounds like you two are close. I remember you mentioned Setsuna lives in a single-parent home?" "Yeah, she lives with her mom, Mai-san. Just the two of them. They're in the apartment across from ours." Futaba followed his gaze out to the opposite building. She had no idea which apartment belonged to the Kaora family, but hearing his words, she felt it necessary to at least pay a visit to express her gratitude. Not for romantic reasons but simply as a matter of good neighborliness. "What about your other neighbors? Have you introduced yourself properly?" Haruto paused, a slightly awkward look on his face. Under his mother's gentle but persistent gaze, he gave an honest answer. "I've thought about it, but the person next door is hardly ever home. They leave early, come home late, and I haven't had the chance to say hello. Not even during holidays? They don't seem to take holidays." Thinking back, he realized that even in his past memories of living there, he'd barely seen the person next door. Futaba was surprised, but quickly dropped the topic. She trusted her son's character; he could handle neighborly relations on his own. As the room fell into a peaceful silence, Mitsuo, annoyed at being ignored, sprawled out on his bed. She stared up at the ceiling, mentally going over all the things she wanted to do during her stay in Tokyo. She'd written it all down in her notebook, but in her rush to leave, she'd forgotten to pack it. Now, she could only remember bits and pieces, most of them impulsive ideas she hadn't even thought through. After lying on the bed for a while, Mitsuo suddenly sat up and quietly scooted over to her brother. She reached out and lightly placed her hand on his shoulder. Even with the difference in their height, she could easily reach his shoulder. She gave it a gentle pat, drawing his attention, then subtly gestured for him to lean in closer. Haruto, having a vague idea of what this might be about, watched Mitsuo lower her head slightly. He leaned in, bringing his ear close to her, curious about what she wanted to say. "You don't have anything to do this afternoon, right? You're not planning to stay cooped up here all day, are you? Where do you want to go?" "No, it's not that I want to go. But Mom came all the way to Tokyo. You're not seriously thinking of keeping her stuck in this tiny room all day, then just sending her back to Itamori, are you?" Haruto hadn't exactly thought that far ahead. Before Mitsuo and his mom came to Tokyo, he had been planning to show them around the city. But now that Mitsuo had brought it up herself, he couldn't resist teasing her a little. Hard to say. At the very least, Mom seems perfectly content to spend the whole day here. It's someone else who seems to be getting restless after only a few minutes. "Isn't this your beloved Tokyo? What, don't even have the patience to sit down for a bit?" "It's because it's Tokyo that I can't sit still." Mitsuo didn't even bother to argue. She just admitted it outright. Watching her get worked up so quickly made Haruto chuckle under his breath. "Why don't we take Mom out for a walk nearby? We're in Bunkyo Ward. There are lots of universities around here. Head west and there's Okanamazu Women's University, Tsukuba, Waseda. You know, all those famous schools you always hear about. And if we go east, there's the University of Tokyo." Haruto paused when he mentioned the University of Tokyo, then glanced sideways at Mitsuo. "What are you looking at me for?" Caught off guard by his gaze, Mitsuo's cheeks turned red. Didn't someone once say she'd get into Tokyo University and come to the city with her head held high? She hadn't expected him to remember that. Mitsuo bit her lip, let out a quiet tsk. Then turned away, avoiding his gaze. She had been just a kid back then. Saying something like that was totally normal, right? She stole a glance back at Haruto, trying hard to dig up some equally embarrassing big talk from his past, but her memory came up blank. As infuriating as it was, he'd always been surprisingly grounded, never making reckless claims. Damn it. At least I had a dream once. You never even dared to dream, you coward. An unexpected counterattack. Haruto studied her expression for a moment, then gave a small nod. Fair enough. I admit, Tokyo University's always been a bit of a stretch for me. That's why I aimed for something a bit more realistic like Waistia or Gakushuin. When it came to grades, no matter how hard Mitsuo worked, she couldn't change the fact that Haruto always did better. It was precisely because of that he'd been able to leave Itamori and study alone in Tokyo. But someone like her, with average grades. Lately, when the topic of her coming to Tokyo came up at home, all she got in response was a gentle smile from Mom. She glanced over at their mother, who was still looking around Haruto's apartment with quiet curiosity, and her mood visibly dropped. Futaba watched from the corner of the room, listening to the exchange between her son and daughter. Though it had been over a month since she'd last seen them, it felt just like home. The way they talked, the way they bickered, nothing had really changed. She could tell her son had matured a little. But considering he'd been living alone in Tokyo for over a month, a bit of change was only natural. It would have been stranger if he hadn't changed at all. This was his first time away from Itamori, living completely on his own. Well, if Mitsuo wants to go out, then let's go out. I've got a few errands to run anyway. Haruto, you go with her. Then how about Mitsuo and I go with you first? We'll help you with your errands, and after that, we can go shopping. You're not that familiar with Tokyo, right? The moment Haruto heard that his mom was going to go out alone, all his attention shifted to her. The last thing he wanted was for her to get lost in a city like this. No need to worry. I've already contacted a friend, she's nearby. She'll pick me up and drop me off later. He hesitated for a moment at the warmth in her smile, then nodded silently. Got it. If anything comes up, just call me. Okay. If I do get lost, I'll be counting on you. She gave him a gentle smile, then turned to her daughter. Mitsuo immediately ducked behind his back. Listen to your brother, okay? Make sure you stick with him. I know. Mitsuo understood that if she threw a tantrum now, she'd probably be left behind. So she obediently nodded and wrapped both arms around Haruto's arm, showing that she'd behave and stay close. Just as Futaba was about to say something else, a ringtone interrupted the moment. But it wasn't Haruto's phone. Oh, it's mine. Futaba picked up her red phone and glanced at the caller ID. Then she looked at Haruto. I'm stepping outside to take this spare key. He handed her the spare key from his drawer, the one he'd pretended to send back home when he lied to Sakai. Then, taking Mitsuo by the hand, he headed straight for the door. Chapter 148, You know I spoil you, right? No one knew why their mother had suddenly come to Tokyo, who she was meeting, or what for. With a mix of curiosity but no intention of interrupting, Haruto simply handed over the apartment key to his mom and took his younger sister out for a walk. Where are we going? Let's just wander around for now. There's enough time to explore the area nearby. As for the rest, we can leave that for tomorrow and the day after. You're mainly here to see some of the famous spots, right? Having never set foot in Tokyo before, everything Mitsuo knew about this bustling city came from TV programs and the weekly magazines she read. Her understanding of Tokyo was limited to landmarks constantly featured in media, the famous tourist attractions and iconic buildings. If you asked Mitsuo what she knew about Tokyo's districts, she'd probably only be able to name Shinjuku and Shibuya. Despite all her longing and fascination for the city, someone who'd never lived here could never truly match the insight of someone who actually called this place home. So what? There's Tokyo Skytree. And Shinjuku, isn't Kabukicho there too? Better not. You're still underage. That place isn't like Itamori. In Itamori, everyone knows everyone, so even the bad ones aren't that bad. But in a city like this, you don't just find people who are annoying, you find people who are dangerous. Especially in places like Kabukicho. Even after countless crackdowns, the darkness there still runs deep. Ooh, the darkness still runs deep. You're making it sound so serious. Are you saying you've been there? Just wait, I'm telling Mom you went to Kabukicho. I haven't. But I do know someone who works there. They've been missing for a while now. No clue if the next time they show up it'll be on some asphalt road. Or in a news segment blurred out by Mosaic. Mitsuo, unfamiliar with such brutal realities, fell silent. There was a cold undertone in Haruto's voice that she didn't quite understand, but it made her uneasy. She stayed quiet for a while, and then finally sneaked a glance at her brother. What do you mean, asphalt road? Do you know how hot uncooled asphalt gets? No. That's not in our textbooks. How would I know? Sensing something was off, Mitsuo pouted and gave a sullen reply. Haruto, walking alongside her, smiled calmly. Over 200 degrees Celsius. At that temperature, most of the human body would completely okay. I get it. Stop. Don't say another word. Mitsuo gritted her teeth. If she kept listening, she was sure she wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. She shot a sideways glare at her brother, who still wore that annoyingly serene smile. Her romantic image of Tokyo had been dulled just a little. She walked quietly beside him, thoughts replaying their earlier conversation over and over. After leaving the apartment, he took his sister toward the direction of the University of Tokyo. Other places were a bit far, but the university was close, so it made sense to check it out first. After a few phone calls, Futaba stood alone in the now empty apartment. For a moment, she simply stood there in silence. Then, she picked up the shoulder bag her husband had once given her and stepped outside. Locking the door behind her, she slipped the spare key into her inner pocket. She made her way toward the subway station they'd arrived at earlier. When she got near Korakuen Station, her eyes swept the area until they landed on a familiar figure. She took a step forward. Ugh, this place just feels like a different world. Not really my vibe. I heard the guys at KO are supposed to be hotter anyway. Walking out from the University of Tokyo, Mitsuo looked a little disappointed. With her grades, even if she worked herself to death, getting into Tokyo University was next to impossible. Even if she did like it here, after walking around for a bit, she knew it was pointless to get her hopes up. So she gave up cleanly. Don't overthink it. Even if there are tons of hot guys, what does that have to do with you? You must have done something sneaky to get that girl Setsuna to like you, huh? What did you do, blackmail her? You think I need to blackmail anyone? He pointed at his own face and smiled gently. TCH. Damn it. They were siblings and shared similar facial features. Yet while Mitsuo's looks were average for a girl, Haruto, as a guy, had a gentle, almost delicate beauty. His smile could melt away winter and bring spring sunshine. He was, unmistakably, the kind of guy who got labeled a soft, handsome sweetheart. If she hadn't grown up with him, hadn't known how rotten his personality could be, she might have fallen for him too. Her friend, Sayaka Tori, had already been smitten, just like any other girl, completely fooled by that face of his. So you're saying Setsuna didn't fall for you because of any dirty tricks? Just got scammed by your angelic face? Haruto had been about to argue, but when he thought it over, her accusation didn't feel entirely wrong. Setsuna had fallen for his looks first. Everything else came after. Anyway, that's not important. We're done with Tokyo University. Where to next? Got any places in mind before the sun goes down? How should I know? You've been living here a whole month. Shouldn't you be the tour guide? Fine, then Koishikawa Korakuen, it's near my place. That a theme park or something? Just because it's called a garden doesn't mean it has rides. It's an actual garden, plants and nature and stuff. We're not senior citizens. Hard pass. Then. Ueno? Asakusa? They sound kinda familiar but not really. Wait, where's that place with the Thunder Gate? Asakusa. Then let's go there. And so, after touring the university, the two siblings hopped on the train and made their way to Asakusa's iconic gate. The area was buzzing with all kinds of shops and vendors. Haruto wasn't particularly interested in any of it, but Mitsuo, on the other hand, was bursting with curiosity. Drawn in by all the souvenirs. She turned toward Haruto, wearing an adorably innocent and pure smile. Unii-chan. Nay, Unii-chan, he cracked. His fists clenched. Haruto wasn't into any of this souvenir stuff, but he did think of Yatsuo, who had stayed back in Itamori. It would be wrong to come back empty-handed. So during their shopping spree, he picked out a few things and handed them to Mitsuo to take back to Yatsuo. I get why we're buying for Yatsuo, but why the hell am I carrying everything? Mitsuo grumbled, arms full of bags of all sizes, glaring at her brother who was walking ahead, empty-handed. Chapter 149, What else could women talk about? After their trip to Asakusa, the siblings returned to the apartment. As they stepped inside, they found the place empty. Clearly, their mother hadn't come back yet. Does mom know someone in Tokyo? Mitsuo asked, glancing around the room. She's never mentioned anything like that before. Isn't it possible she didn't tell you because she knew you'd bug her non-stop to come along and meet that person? Hearing that, Haruto casually tossed the souvenir bags onto the side table and turned around to look at his sister standing in the middle of the living room. He stepped forward, reached out and pinched her cheeks. Ow! What the heck? Mitsuo yelped, grinning through the pain as she swatted at him in retaliation. Haruto released his grip just in time, dodging her slap with ease. Watching her rub her sore cheek with both hands, he couldn't help but chuckle as he walked toward the fridge. What are you doing? Mitsuo asked, suspicious. I think normal people can already guess what should be done at this time. But Mom's not back yet, right? How about the three of us head out again and try some Western food this time? If you're paying, I might be convinced. Harut replied with a raised brow. Mitsuo had already experienced a high-end traditional Japanese meal earlier that afternoon. By her standards, it was fancy enough to be unforgettable. Now, she was full of curiosity about Western cuisine, something she'd never tried in an actual restaurant. So, how expensive is it? It's probably not that pricey per person, right? She asked cautiously. If it wasn't too outrageous, she figured it might be worth giving it a shot. Haruto, who was already preparing ingredients in the kitchen, didn't quite know how to answer her. He glanced at Mitsuo, sighed, and instead of responding, quietly continued washing the vegetables. When he didn't answer, Mitsuo's curiosity still lingered, but she gave up pushing. She walked over to his side and began helping him prep the food. It wasn't that Mitsuo wanted to be helpful, she simply didn't know what else to do. Haruto's place was far too minimalist. No TV, no game consoles, just a desk piled high with books. That was it. This was a rare trip to Tokyo, and who knew when she'd be back again? There was no way she could just sit still and read like it was any ordinary day. She figured, if she showed her mom how helpful and obedient she was, maybe just maybe her dream of attending high school in Tokyo could become reality. Haruto had no clue what thoughts were swirling around his sister's head. But when Mitsuo suddenly cozied up beside him and offered to help prepare dinner, he gave her a subtle look and said nothing, quietly going back to cooking. Meanwhile, back near the subway station, Mimizu Futaba had finally returned to the neighborhood after getting directions from station staff. She stood at Korakuen Station, glancing around with a bewildered look. Now, which way was it again? She pressed a hand to her face, frowning in thought. It wasn't that she couldn't just call her son and have him come fetch her, but the idea of making her own kid drop everything to play escort made her feel slightly ashamed. After a pause, she sighed softly. Just as she was about to retrace her steps, a gentle voice called out from beside her. Excuse me, do you need help? Surprised by the voice of a girl behind her, Futaba turned slowly and found herself looking at someone unexpected. Still not back, huh? Are you sure you don't want to just call Mom? Mitsuo asked, seated cross-legged in the room after being kicked out of the kitchen by her brother. Haruto glanced at the clock on the desk. If she's not back in a few more ding-dong. The doorbell rang, cutting him off. Mitsuo sprang up excitedly. I'll get it. Maybe it's Mom. Her footsteps thudded across the floor. Haruto briefly glanced at her barefoot, running in just her white socks before silently returning to the kitchen. Mitsuo opened the door and blinked in surprise. Standing there was a petite girl who, despite being older than Mitsuo, looked like a middle schooler. Well, not that young, but definitely younger than expected. Maybe even younger than their sister Yotsuo. Big bro, your girlfriend's here. Mitsuo called back playfully. She swung the door open and stepped aside, letting the girl enter. The girl Setsuna nodded politely to Mitsuo, then walked in and spotted Haruto working in the kitchen. Is your mother not home? Setsuna asked, surprised to see only the siblings inside. She had something to do this afternoon. Went to meet someone she knows. Not sure when she'll be back. Mitsuo answered with a curious glance. Did you need something from my brother? Setsuna nodded slightly. Mom's already prepared dinner. She's ready to meet with your mother. Mitsuo looked stunned. She studied Setsuna more closely, then shifted her gaze to her brother. Haruto raised an eyebrow, a little surprised himself. I see. Then let's bring the food I just finished prepping over to your place. I'll contact Mom too. It was about time anyway, and if Futaba still hadn't returned, Haruto had to consider the possibility she'd gotten lost. And if she was lost in this massive city, it definitely wouldn't be a quick fix. He washed and dried his hands, then took out his phone, just as ding-dong. The doorbell rang again. Before Haruto could move, Mitsuo had already dashed to the door. She opened it and there stood Mimizu Futaba. Seeing her mother safe and sound, Mitsuo breathed a silent sigh of relief and swung the door wide open. With Futaba's arrival, the apartment suddenly felt a lot smaller. 4 people in a room that usually only had 2 made it feel cramped. Mitsuo quietly slipped over to sit on Haruto's bed. Futaba, surprised to see Setsuna there, hadn't expected to meet her son's girlfriend this soon. Good evening, Auntie. Setsuna greeted warmly. Good evening. Futaba replied politely. She planned to speak privately with her son about something, but now didn't feel like the right time. Seeing that everyone was finally here, Haruto spoke up. Setsuna's mom has already made dinner. She's waiting for us. Right now. Futaba blinked. She glanced at the clock. Yes, it was about dinner time. Still, she hadn't been prepared to meet her son's girlfriend's family so suddenly. It all felt a little rushed. My son is very easygoing, you don't need to worry about formalities. Setsuna, go ahead and head back first. We'll come right after. Okay. With that, Setsuna nodded and slipped out, planning to give her mom a heads up to be ready. As soon as she left, he turned to Mitsuha and gestured for her to come over. Unsure what he wanted, Mitsuha cautiously approached. Haruto instructed her to plate the freshly cooked food, cover it with plastic wrap, and hold it ready for transport. Anything I can help with? She asked. Futaba glanced at her daughter, then turned to the busy figure of Haruto. After a moment of contemplation, she asked if there was anything she could help with. We're pretty much done here. Haruto replied with a small smile. Everything's ready, let's head over to Setsuna's place. With one last glance at her son, Futaba quietly set aside whatever thoughts had been lingering in her heart and followed Haruto and Mitsuha out of the apartment. As the door clicked shut behind them, the three of them made their way toward the Kaora residence. We were just about to call you, Haruto said as they walked. You were gone so long that Mitsuha and I got worried. Just as we were dialing, the doorbell rang. Everything went smoothly up until that station by the amusement park. Futaba explained. But once I got out, I got completely turned around and didn't know which way to go. Luckily, I ran into a kind girl who knew the area and helped guide me nearby before heading off. A girl? Haruto raised an eyebrow. Yeah. A blonde girl, pretty rare to see. Futaba added. Futaba noticed the sudden silence from her son. He looked unusually thoughtful, and a flicker of unease passed over his face. What is it? She asked. Is something wrong? No. Not really. Haruto replied a little too quickly. It's just that when you said blonde, it made me think of someone I know. Was she wearing twin tails? Yeah, she was. You couldn't really blame Haruto for the PTSD. A blonde girl who knew her way around the area near his apartment? There was only one person that fit the bill. Someone you know? Futaba probed gently, clearly picking up on his reaction. Blonde? Mitsuha, overhearing the exchange, leaned in close to her brother with narrowed eyes. Was she a foreigner? No. Just a classmate. He replied with a sigh. She's not foreign. Mitsuha's tone stretched, suspicious. Her eyes lingered on her brother, clearly thinking there was more to the story than he was letting on. Haruto ignored her and led the way up the stairs. Reaching the door to the Kaora household, he rang the bell. Setsuna had been waiting inside and opened the door almost immediately, greeting Haruto and his family with a warm smile. Behind her, her mother Kiramai appeared, wearing a gentle expression as she joined her daughter in welcoming their guests. The previously chatty Mitsuha fell completely silent the moment she saw Setsuna and her mother. She stood still, her demeanor instantly switching to that of a demure young lady. Futaba, meanwhile, stood just behind Haruto. As the door opened, her eyes naturally went to the woman beside Setsuna. The two mothers exchanged a brief, cordial smile and a polite nod before letting their gazes drift elsewhere. Please, come in. Setsuna said, pulling the door open further. Mai stood just inside, gesturing kindly for them to enter. Her eyes lingered briefly on Haruto. Their gazes met for a fraction of a second then drifted apart, as if nothing had happened. Once everyone was inside, Setsuna quietly closed the door. Haruto began placing the dishes he'd brought on the dining table, with Mitsuha helping him arrange them. You must be Haruto's mother, Mrs. Mamizu? Mai began. Yes, that's me. I've heard so much about you. Thank you for raising such a wonderful son. Haruto has taught Setsuna so much during their time together. I'm very grateful. And thank you for taking care of my son while he's been here in Tokyo. Futaba replied politely. As the two mothers exchanged niceties, Haruto stood off to the side, feeling a wave of déjà vu. Mai, usually so easygoing, had suddenly become very formal. His own mother, however, seemed just like her usual self. Haruto and Setsuna shared a quick glance then, as if on cue, stepped in to break up the awkward atmosphere. Well, now that everyone's here, shall we get dinner started? Haruto suggested. I'm sorry I didn't prepare a proper gift. Futaba said apologetically. But you did. Mai replied with a soft smile, her gaze drifting to the table laden with food. The two women looked at each other again, exchanging a knowing look and a subtle smile. Perhaps it was secrets. Or maybe just normal human interactions. Whatever the reason, the dinner that followed was quietly stifling. Setsuna remained her usual calm self, eating quietly at the table, but Mitsuha clearly struggled. She kept glancing at Haruto, wanting to say something but holding herself back due to the heavy silence hanging in the air. Haruto, for his part, didn't pay her much attention. After the quietly uncomfortable dinner, Haruto and Setsuna began clearing the table. Their mothers moved to the sofa, chatting leisurely about parenting experiences. Unable to stand the tense atmosphere, Mitsuha gravitated toward her brother to help with the cleanup. Aren't you going to sit with them in the living room? Haruto asked, raising a brow at her unexpected helpfulness. I'm not their age group. Mitsuo said flatly. We wouldn't even have anything to talk about. It's way too awkward just sitting there. It's better over here. Need help with anything? I've got this side covered. Go help Setsuna instead. He waved her off with a subtle smirk. There was no way Mitsuo would be any help here, not without getting in the way. Shrugging off the rejection, Mitsuo drifted over to Setsuna and immediately began piling on the charm. Sis. She said sweetly, sister-in-law. From the way Setsuna's lips curled into a small smile, it was clear the effort was paying off. With nothing to do back at his apartment, Haruto didn't feel any rush to leave. Noticing how well his mother and Mai were getting along, he led Mitsuo into Setsuna's room so the adults could have their space. Once the door shut behind them, Mitsuo's demeanor instantly relaxed. Looking out this window. The view is opposite your apartment, isn't it? She asked, peering out at the city lights. Tokyo at night, glimmering skyscrapers, neon reflections. Mitsuo stood still, mesmerized. She'd never seen a view like this back in Itamari. Sure, she'd seen similar scenes on TV. But this was different. Seeing it with her own eyes, the vibrant city, the soft night breeze was a whole other world. Yeah. My apartment faces south. This one faces west. But if you step out onto the balcony, you can see mine from there. Haruto walked up behind her and placed his hands gently on her slim shoulders, giving them a slight squeeze. Mitsuo flinched, pulling her neck in like a turtle. What are you doing? She said, shooting him a glare. Just checking to see if you've gained weight during this time. I walk to and from school every day. No chance of gaining anything. If anything, you should be the one gaining weight living all cushy in Tokyo. She squinted at his neck, then poked at his stomach with her fingers. Huh? You didn't put on any weight. She muttered, a bit disappointed. Setsuna watched their sibling banter with a quiet smile, a flicker of envy crossing her face. Haruto let go and walked back to her side, reaching out to gently ruffle her hair. Setsuna closed her eyes, visibly content under his touch. Watching the scene unfold, Mitsuo's expression twisted into a sour grimace. She was itching to throw some barbed words at her brother, but with Setsuna there, she held her tongue. She swallowed the bitterness for now. But later, when it was just her and her no-good brother, he'd be getting it. Mitsuo stared at him for a while. She thought to herself it was rare for her to come all the way to Tokyo, and yet she was spending so much of her time focused on her big brother. Wasn't that kind of a waste? While Haruto was distracted, she quietly made her way over to Setsuna, stepped behind her, and gently wrapped her arms around her in a hug. Setsuna blinked in surprise, turning to look at the girl suddenly clinging to her. Her gaze then flicked over to Haruto, uncertain and a little lost. What was Mitsuo trying to do? What are you doing? Setsuna asked. You two are dating. Since you're my brother's girlfriend, that makes you kind of like my future sister, right? A little sister hugging her big sister, isn't that totally normal? Mitsuo said with a smile. It sounded logical enough. But as he watched Mitsuo, Haruto couldn't shake the feeling that she had something else in mind. Shouldn't you go check on Mom and the others? He asked. See how they're doing? And leave you here alone with Setsuna? There are things girls talk about that guys shouldn't be listening to. Even if you're my brother or Setsuna's boyfriend, we're allowed to have some secrets, don't you think? Mitsuo glanced over at Setsuna, and somehow, perhaps caught in her pace, Setsuna gave a small nod when Haruto looked at her. She hadn't really planned on anything like this, but Mitsuo's words stirred up a bit of curiosity in her heart. What kind of person had Haruto been, in Mitsuo's eyes? What stories could she tell? That curiosity was enough to convince her. All right, he said, finally giving in. You two talk. I'll go check on them. He was a little concerned too, mainly about how Mai was doing. But seeing the two girls genuinely wanting to chat, he didn't linger. Quietly, he left the room, gently closing the door behind him. Just as he stepped out, he caught the sound of conversation from the living room. My friend recommended a different brand. It works way better than what I was using before. My skin doesn't feel nearly as dry lately. Wait, what? He had expected a serious discussion, maybe something about Setsuna, their relationship, or even the future. But no. It was skincare? Haruto blinked, walking slowly toward the voices. When he reached them, he stopped and listened for a while, silently standing nearby. His mother and Mai were exchanging beauty tips, comparing products, discussing routines, trading stories about struggling with dry skin. Their conversation was surprisingly lively. At first, Mai had felt a bit tense. She wasn't sure how to talk to Haruto's mother. But once she opened up, she quickly realized that the older woman was far more easygoing than she'd imagined. Not strict at all, kind, even. Their conversation had flowed naturally from talking about children, to motherhood, and now to taking care of their own skin. Chapter 150, What kind of dream were you having? Sakai crouched by her window, staring out into the blackened night beyond. The binoculars she had bought earlier weren't quite clear enough. A while ago, she'd upgraded to a much more expensive set of amateur astronomical telescopes. They weren't professional grade, but more than enough to observe the daily life of a certain someone, specifically, Haruto. Haruto's little sister. She kind of looks like him. And that more mature-looking woman must be his mom, right? Though honestly, she doesn't really look like a mom, more like an older sister. I wonder if he actually has an older sister I don't know about. Earlier that evening, she had clearly seen Haruto lead his family to the Kira residence. Sakai had been watching their door ever since. She figured they'd only stay for about an hour, but now 2 had passed and still, no sign of them leaving. Looks like his family gets along well with Setsuna. If this keeps up. Sakai's mood took a sharp downturn. The chance of her winning felt like it was slipping further out of reach. She withdrew from the telescope for a moment, sipping on some juice while gazing vacantly out at the night sky. Even she couldn't make sense of her own thoughts anymore. She sighed heavily, returning to the telescope to peer again at the Kira house, only to be interrupted by a voice outside her door. Sakai. You're still awake, right? Startled, Sakai turned her head, recognizing her mother's voice say Yoko. She stepped toward the door, opening it just a crack and poking her head out. I'm up. Something wrong? It's been a while since last time. Weren't you going to bring your boyfriend over sometime? Isn't it vacation now? Yoko, still drying her hair in the living room, glanced toward her daughter, who hadn't even stepped fully out of her room. She asked casually, but her eyes held a faint edge of expectation. They had agreed, after all, Sakai was supposed to bring her boyfriend home and introduce him. But time had passed, and there hadn't been a single word about it. Sakai might not seem to care, but Yoko was starting to get curious. She and her daughter rarely had anything in common to talk about. Even so, she wasn't oblivious. She knew she hadn't been the most attentive mother. That didn't mean she didn't care. It's vacation, sure, but not everyone's free. He's got stuff to deal with. He doesn't have time to hang out with me. Sakai's face fell immediately. She had thought her mom had something urgent to say, but it turned out to be this. Her tone turned flat and lifeless, and she pulled her head back in, slamming the door shut with a thud. Still standing in the living room, Yoko paused mid-motion with her towel. She caught that violent door slam loud and clear and the mood behind it. Her daughter's behavior had been strange lately, and now her suspicions only deepened. Narrowing her eyes, she made a mental note to pay more attention from now on. The 2 mothers had been chatting away happily for quite a while, but no matter how lively the conversation, it was still getting late. It's already pretty late. We should head back. Haruto finally suggested. As the topic drifted toward their children, wondering what kind of future the next generation might have, what kind of child Haruto and Setsuna might produce someday, Futaba even commented that she'd prefer a grandson if it came to that. That was his cue to step in. He moved next to Futaba, gently reminding her that it was time to go. Yeah. You're right. It's already 9. Time to get some rest. Are you heading back to your apartment? Asked Mai, glancing at him. She had visited his place more than once and knew it well. It wasn't exactly spacious. Housing 3 people in there would be tight. I've got extra futons. Worst case, we'll lay out something on the floor. It'll be a bit cramped, but manageable. Haruto had caught the subtext behind her words. Mai opened her mouth, ready to speak, but after seeing his expression, she quietly swallowed the words back down. He called out to Mitsuha, who was still in Setsuna's room. The girl had originally planned to spend the night with Setsuna, but when the door opened and she saw their mother standing in the living room, she immediately climbed up and followed her brother out in silence. After bidding farewell to Mai, the 3 of them returned to Haruto's apartment. May's weather was noticeably warmer than April's. Even at night, the streets weren't cold. Mitsuha, walking beside Haruto, seemed to want to pry deeper into what her brother had been up to during his time in Tokyo. You sure are popular in Tokyo, huh? He turned to find Mitsuha giving him a look, a smirk playing at her lips. I've always been well aware of that, thanks. What exactly are you referring to? He wasn't exactly blessed with some extraordinary charisma, but his personality wasn't unpleasant, and his looks were decently above average. He had always known he was somewhat popular, never deluded about it, but never modest either. As the saying goes, a man should know himself, and he has always done a good job in this regard. Mitsuha watched him with a mixture of amusement and resignation. Her brother never pretended to be something he wasn't, never put on a humble front. She silently pitied the girls who were fooled by his outward appearance. If only they knew. Nothing. Forget it. She had wanted to ask why, out of all the girls around him, he had chosen Setsuna, but seeing his reaction just killed the conversation dead. Haruto caught the glance, but didn't press further. They soon reached the apartment. He opened the door, letting the two women inside before following them in. He folded up the low table and leaned it against the wall, securing it so it wouldn't fall. Then, he laid out spare futons on the floor. It was a modest setup, but it would work. No pillows, huh? That's gonna suck. Mitsuo frowned, unimpressed. Before bed, a shower was in order. Haruto left the apartment to buy some drinks, leaving the space to his mom and sister. Watching her brother disappear down the street, Mitsuo narrowed her eyes suspiciously. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was sneaking off somewhere for fun. But she couldn't exactly follow him, either. She stared after him for a bit, then closed the door. Sakai should be home, but her mom's probably there too. He did want to see Sakai during the break even if just for a bit. But considering the time, she was probably already asleep, and her mom definitely home. He really didn't want to bump into Yoko at her doorstep in the dead of night. It wasn't like he didn't have other chances to see Sakai. Waking up the whole household just for a late-night visit was unnecessary. Following the path he knew well, he soon arrived at his usual convenience store. To his surprise, the night shift had changed. The usual female clerk wasn't there. Instead, a male employee stood behind the register. He briefly wondered about the scheduling, but of course didn't ask. Wandering through the aisles, he scanned the shelves. He didn't need anything in particular, but it felt weird to go back empty-handed. His eyes landed on a pack of milk caramels. Mitsuo might like these. But then he frowned. It's late. If she gets cavities, she'll blame me. Better not. He figured he had about an hour to kill, so he lingered in the store for a while. Flipping through a few magazines, he picked out a weekly one, grabbed a few drinks, some hot coffee, and a pack of Odin before heading out. Haruto stopped his steps in a quiet park nearby and sat down on a bench. He set the shopping bag down beside him, placing the Odin on the side, then opened the coffee, tilted his head back, and gazed up at the starry sky, taking a sip. We've already been to Asakusa and bought some souvenirs. Tomorrow, maybe we'll head to Roppongi. It's rare that we're in Tokyo, and maybe Mom would find something there she'd like to buy. I'll pick up a random gift for old man, and I bet the old man will be pretty happy about it too. As for who the old man was besides Haruto, there was only one other man in the house. As the mayor of Itomori, Mamazuto Shiki's annual income wasn't low at all. In fact, it was certainly higher than most people living in Tokyo. Even though Roppongi was a bustling and glamorous area, it wasn't a place he couldn't afford. Though Haruto still had some living expenses left, in a place like Roppongi, he would be pushing it. If they really went tomorrow, he'd definitely have no room for indulgence. Mitsuo might be really excited about a place that represents the city's prosperity. Well, besides Roppongi, there are some other attractions around here. What was it again? Even though he had lived here for over 10 years, Haruto couldn't recall all the places. Especially now, many spots had subtle changes, and his memories didn't perfectly match the reality around him, leaving him uncertain for a moment. After thinking for a while, he decided on Roppongi, though it was still a tentative plan. He gave up on overthinking it, stood up, and started walking toward his apartment. It was getting late, and even though he had time, he figured the others must have already finished their baths. When he reached the door of his apartment, Haruto pressed the doorbell. Footsteps could be heard from inside, and Mitsuo, with her long damp hair down, appeared at the door, her eyes fixed on him. What's wrong? You went out to sneak a snack, didn't you? Huh? You didn't even wipe the corner of your mouth clean. Instinctively raising his hand to wipe his mouth, he paused, seeing Mitsuo's teasing smile. He sighed and handed her the shopping bag. I picked up something for you and Mom. Not sure if you'll use them, but if not, just take them back. Huh? Mitsuo looked down at the bag and immediately blushed. Aside from drinks and snacks, there were some feminine hygiene products that women might need every month. Mitsuo grinned, looking at him, wanting to be embarrassed, but then remembered she had forgotten to bring any herself. She snatched the bag from his hand and quickly ran back inside. Haruto entered the apartment, closing the door behind him. Inside, his mother was already in her pajamas, and Mitsuo had changed too. Haruto glanced around briefly and then headed to the bathroom. He tossed their clothes into the washing machine, checked the bathroom for any issues, and then closed the door, locking it. Even if Mitsuo has something urgent to do later, she has to hold it in. 10 minutes later. After showering, he came out in his pajamas. He looked at Mitsuo, sitting in the room, drying her hair and looking a little bored. He blew a bit at his own damp hair. Alright, it's about time. We should sleep. Didn't you buy a pillow while you were out? At this hour? Who's still selling? Oh, I guess there are places, but they're too far. I'll just fold my clothes and make do tonight. I'll buy one tomorrow. You can have mine. Futaba, who originally wanted to sleep on the floor with her daughter, slept on the bed after being persuaded by Haruto and Mitsuo. But now after hearing what Mitsuo said, she picked up the pillow and handed it to Mitsuo. No, I don't need it. I was just complaining. Knowing her mother's health was delicate, Mitsuo refused the pillow. Even though she could be a little spoiled, she knew what was appropriate. She rejected her mother's offer, then grabbed the corner of the blanket and burrowed into futon, closing her eyes. Time to sleep. Futaba looked helplessly at Haruto, who shook his head and walked to the light switch. Time to sleep. With a resigned sigh, Futaba placed the pillow aside, lay down on the bed, and Haruto turned off the light. He then lay down on the futon. It had been a long time since he had slept beside Mitsuo like this. As he closed his eyes, he could hear her steady breathing, making him unusually alert. His hand accidentally brushed against Mitsuo's, and she immediately pulled it back. Slowly opening his eyes, he turned his head toward her. In the moonlight, he saw her clear, bright eyes staring back at him, a discontent expression on her face. They locked eyes for a moment, neither of them speaking. Mimizu Futaba, the mother of both of them, was lying on the bed beside them. No one wanted to speak, so that their mother could not get a good rest. In this situation, Mitsuo stared at Haruto for a while, then turned her back, closed her eyes, and quietly waited to fall asleep. Hearing the soft rustle as Mitsuo turned her back to him, Haruto slightly tilted his head to gaze at the ceiling, then quietly closed his own eyes. He usually fell asleep around 9, but tonight he had stayed up past 10. Already exhausted, it didn't take long after closing his eyes for his consciousness to blur and for him to sink into sleep. All awareness of the world around him faded. Gentle breathing echoed softly in the quiet room. Mitsuo slowly turned back over and looked at Haruto beside her. Seeing him already fast asleep without her even noticing, she furrowed her brows slightly. It was her first time coming to such a dazzling and unfamiliar city. Though she had always dreamed of this place, always longed for the energy of the big city, now that she was finally here, all she felt was anxiety and unease. Walking down the streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong. The only time she felt calm was when she stayed close to Haruto. Watching how naturally he navigated everything here, how familiar he seemed with this world, it brought her a strange sense of comfort. Familiar him, and unfamiliar him. Looking at his sleeping face, Mitsuo had a sudden urge to reach out and pinch his nose. If only Mom wasn't here. With Futaba's presence, her motherly authority hanging in the air, Mitsuo didn't dare do anything. She closed her eyes again and, before long, drifted into slumber as well. Hey, Mitsuo, you're even more dazzling than yesterday. You're so bright, I can barely keep my eyes open. In front of her stood a handsome young man, smiling warmly. He was the first person she met in Tokyo, and now her boyfriend. Though his face looked eerily similar to her brother's, his personality was completely different, gentle, kind, full of affection. He would try to grant her every wish, always preparing little surprises to make her smile. He was the perfect boyfriend. All. Hayato, thank you. No need to thank me. Seeing your smile, that's all the happiness I need. As his face moved closer, smiling sweetly at her, Mitsuo felt her heart melt. Ah. So embarrassing, no need to be shy. Come on, give me a kiss of love as a reward. He closed his eyes and puckered his lips, waiting for her reply. Mitsuo's heart fluttered with nervous anticipation. Tap. A soft thud echoed, followed by a sharp pain on her forehead. Mitsuo's eyes flew open. The boy had vanished. In his place stood a familiar face. And an all too familiar, exasperated expression. Still half asleep, Mitsuo blinked at Haruto, her mind slow to catch up. A frown tugged at her lips. What was that about? What kind of dream were you having? And nothing. As his question brought her dream back into focus, Mitsuo looked away, eyes shifty and unsure. She couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. Really? Then who's Hayato? What? Her face turned beet red. Eyes wide, she stared at him in shock. Flustered, she tugged the blanket over her face, avoiding his gaze, her expression growing more and more frantic. On no idea. You must have misheard. You kissed me. Huh? In your sleep. You kissed me. Chapter 151, You were never this friendly in Itamari, were you? What happened here? My ass. Still dazed from the vivid dreams she'd had, Mitsuo didn't even have time to feel embarrassed or shocked before descending into a fiery spiral of shame and rage, all thanks to Haruto's teasing remark. From under the covers, she instinctively kicked out hard, landing a solid strike on him that sent most of his body flying out of the futon. Haruto, who had just meant to joke around a little, hadn't expected such a violent reaction. Completely caught off guard, he nearly rolled off the bed entirely. Go die, you idiot. Seeing how genuinely pissed Mitsuo was, he decided to retaliate. He crawled out of the futon and reached for her, grabbing the blanket and rolling her up like a sushi roll until she was trapped inside. Sitting triumphantly on top, he hooked a finger around her nose without a care for hygiene or manners. "You bastard. Let me out right now or I swear I'll make you regret it. Are you sure that's what you want to say when you're clearly at a disadvantage here? If I just don't let you out, then I win, right? Ugh, don't think you can get away with this just because Ow ahhh. As Mitsuo craned her head upward, the sharp pain in her nose made her squeal like a piglet. Her cries were so loud that even Futaba, who had been pretending to sleep while quietly observing her siblings' antics, finally opened her eyes. She slowly sat up in bed and gave the rowdy pair a disapproving look. "Haruto, Mitsuo, there's a limit to how much nonsense I'll tolerate." He started it. "MMPH." Mitsuo tried to protest but quickly clammed up under their mother's stern gaze. When Haruto finally got off the blanket roll and she wiggled free, she shot him a nasty glare before falling silent. He didn't bother arguing. He just smiled faintly and walked over to his wardrobe, ready to change out of his pajamas. "Can't you at least go to the bathroom to change?" Mitsuo grumbled, watching him shamelessly undress right in front of her. "Huh? Why would that matter? It's not like you're a stranger. When we were kids, I held you in my arms and peed thwack." Before he could finish that sentence, Mitsuo grabbed a pillow from the bed and flung it at his face, cutting him off mid-sentence. Her face was beet red like an overripe apple, which only made Haruto, who had known her since they were kids, feel a strange, almost smug satisfaction. Still smiling, he finished getting dressed and walked off to prepare breakfast. Watching him move around the kitchen like it was no big deal nearly made Mitsuo burst a blood vessel. She glanced over to her mom for support, but Futaba was already calmly folding up the bedding. She gave Mitsuo a gentle smile before heading into the bathroom first. "Don't forget to hang up your laundry later," Haruto said from the kitchen, not even turning around. "I don't want to hear you complaining again." Mitsuo gritted her teeth, annoyed but unable to refute him. She reluctantly walked over to the washing machine. Their clothes, hers and their mother's, had already been washed last night, so all that was left was to hang them up. Haruto's clothes would go in after that. Later, as they sat down to eat the breakfast Haruto had cooked, Mitsuo looked up at him from across the table. Her eyes lingered on his face for a few seconds before she spoke up. "So, what's the plan for today? I figured we'd check out Tokyo Tower first, then head over to Roppongi for a walk. That should take us through the evening, then we can head back and rest." "Roppongi? You mean that famous rich people district?" Mitsuo might not have known much about other areas of Tokyo, but she'd definitely seen Roppongi featured often enough on TV. The Minato ward itself was already a special place, one of the city's core districts, but Roppongi stood out even more as a hub of wealth and high-end living. Just like how Shinjuku and Shibuya were synonymous with fashion, or Chiyoda evoked the image of power and authority, or Bunkyo was linked to academia, Minato was the undisputed face of luxury and business. Whether it was Aoyama's chic shopping streets or the high-end residential neighborhoods of Azabu and Shirokane, these places were regulars on variety shows and often cited as symbols of Tokyo's elite. Rich people district? That'd be Aoyamazaka. Roppongi's a bit more. Let's go. Roppongi it is. Seeing her suddenly so fired up, Haruto was momentarily at a loss for words. He glanced over at his mother, who didn't object, so it looked like the plan was set. Tokyo Tower and Roppongi it was. There were actually two Tokyo Towers. The first, built in 1958, was the original Tokyo Tower, Tokyo's tallest freestanding structure at the time, and the city's main TV and radio broadcasting hub. But with the skyline getting taller and more crowded, its signals were increasingly blocked. That's when it was replaced by the new Tokyo Tower. The new one, of course, is the Tokyo Skytree, completed at 634 meters and once the world's tallest tower, earning it a Guinness World Record. That title didn't last, eventually overtaken by the Burj Khalifa. Now, it's officially known as the world's tallest building. Still, that doesn't take away from the marvel of the Skytree or the breathtaking panoramic view from its summit. Haruto wasn't all that interested in the original Tokyo Tower. When he said Tokyo Tower, he meant the Skytree in Sumida Ward. Sumida lies east of Bunkyo, even further than Asakusa. In terms of distance from their apartment, it's actually closer than Minato, so the plan was to hit Roppongi first, then head over to the Skytree in the evening to catch the view, and finally return home. And since the Skytree is right on the border of Sumida and Asakusa, they could even swing by the famous Kaminaraman Gate that Futaba missed yesterday. It wouldn't disrupt the plan at all. So expensive. As they walked out of Roppongi Hills, Mitsuo muttered a phrase that most people say more than once in their lives. She glanced sideways at her mother beside her. The three of them had wandered around Roppongi, and Mitsuo had seen all kinds of luxury brands and trendy seasonal outfits she'd never encountered before. Her instincts as a girl kicked and she wanted to buy them all. But the moment her eyes landed on the price tags, it felt like someone dumped a bucket of cold water over her head. Her excitement instantly vanished, and her eyes widened in disbelief. Had Haruto not covered her mouth in time, the shock in her voice would have probably warmed the entire boutique and drawn everyone's attention. Now, outside the upscale complex, Mitsuo still had to take a deep breath to calm her mixed emotions. She trailed behind her mother quietly and gave her older brother a sideways glance. "Do you come to places like this often?" "For what?" "To work as a waiter?" Haruto replied without missing a beat. He knew himself too well to entertain the idea. Mitsuo couldn't even bring herself to tease him for it. She just walked along sulkily, her expression shifting now and then, as if caught up in some inner debate. Despite their outing to Roppongi, the total haul was less than 3 items, 2 of which were bought by his mother as gifts for his father and his grandma. Haruto and Mitsuo had merely tagged along, playing the role of bag carriers and fashion consultants, offering opinions on what might suit their grandmother or father. Driven by curiosity about the fancy shops, Mitsuo endured the emotional roller coaster and stuck with them through Roppongi. But instead of dining there, they decided to take the subway and head toward Tokyo Skytree. Unlike the old Tokyo Tower, Skytree wasn't just for broadcasting. It had been transformed into a full entertainment complex with shopping malls, an aquarium, and a cinema, sprawling over 400 meters and nearly 37,000 square meters of land. Normally, Mitsuo would have been excited about such an outing, but after Roppongi, her mood had clearly taken a hit. Though she looked mildly thrilled upon arrival at the Skytree, her enthusiasm didn't quite reach her eyes. The experience in Roppongi had hit her harder than expected. One dress she liked cost more than her total living expenses for several years. She couldn't understand how could a single piece of clothing cost that much? Could regular people actually afford that kind of thing? As they ate lunch, she chewed on her meat with exaggerated force, like she was trying to vent some frustration. Both Futaba and Haruto couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. Even though their father was a mayor now, Toshiki hadn't increased their allowance, nor had he transferred Mitsuo to a better school in Itamari. Everything had stayed exactly the same. Haruto could more or less understand how much of a shock today must have been for her. "Yeah, it looks expensive," he said, "but once you start working you'll be able to afford it?" She cut him off flatly. "No. You'll realize just how absurdly expensive it is. And that you still can't afford it." Mitsuo had been bracing for some kind of motivational pep talk. Instead, she got a shot of cold, hard reality. She rolled her eyes and ignored him, stuffing more food into her mouth until her cheeks puffed out like a hamster's. It was obvious she was turning her despair into appetite. When girls are overwhelmed, they usually choose between feeding their desire for things or feeding their stomachs. After lunch, the three of them bought tickets to go up the Skytree. Last year, Yatsuo came here and only paid 1,300 yen to see the whole view. Wonder if she'll regret not coming sooner after she sees this? Standing on the second observation deck at 450 meters, Mitsuo glanced down through the glass floor, her face paling slightly. Then she looked over at Haruto, using a joke about their younger sister to mask her own unease. "What about you? Any regrets for not coming here 3 years ago?" Haruto raised an eyebrow and shot the question back at her. Mitsuo pursed her lips and didn't answer. Looking out at the distance was fine, but the second she looked down, it made her stomach churn. For visitors over 12 years old, admission to the first deck at 350 meters was 2,000 yen per person. If you wanted to go up to the second deck at 450 meters, it cost an extra 1,000 yen. That meant, for adults, the full Skytree experience cost 3,000 yen each. For the three of them, that was 9,000 yen. Mitsuo couldn't help but gasp when her mother paid the bill. "The view's amazing, yeah. But, is it expensive?" She sighed as she looked out over the city, tugging lightly on Haruto's sleeve. He turned to see her small hand holding onto him. Noticing how pale she looked, he didn't make a snide remark like he usually would. He simply followed her gaze into the distance. Standing nearby, Futaba caught their interaction and smiled softly. They didn't stay too long at the Skytree. Even though the tickets cost a fortune, it was hard to stay interested for more than a little while. The view didn't change, and Mitsuo wasn't the type to appreciate scenery for scenery's sake. Boredom set in quickly. After a brief discussion, they left the tower. Mitsuo's interest was suddenly piqued when she remembered Asakusa's Thunder Gate, which they'd visited the day before. She dragged her mother along to see it again, repeating the legends and trivia Haruto had told her the day before, all of which she had somehow memorized. Haruto just watched her calmly as she talked, while Mitsuo very pointedly ignored his presence. By around 3 p.m. they returned to the apartment to drop off their things. At Futaba's suggestion, they didn't go to any more major sightseeing spots. Instead, they visited the local shopping street in Haruto's neighborhood. Futaba wanted to get a feel for the area where her son lived and see what kind of people live there. Mitsuo, on the other hand, just wanted to go shopping. A pillow. A pillow. I am not going another night without one. They sell them at the stores in the shopping district. Just pick one up later, okay? Stop yelling, you're about to make me go deaf. Why didn't we think about this while we were out earlier? Because the shops in Roppongi might have decent quality, but have you seen the prices? Do you have that kind of money? Mitsuo fell silent, unable to argue. She had been looking for a reason to complain, but recalling those outrageous prices back in Roppongi, her mood only just starting to improve sank again. She mumbled something under her breath. Curiously, Haruto leaned in to listen. Her whispers were strange little mutterings, things like "I'm going to amaze everyone someday. And just wait till I have money." Before he could comment, a cheerful voice called out. "Hey! Haruto, out shopping again today? We've got fresh veggies, want to come take a look? Brought your family along today? Check out today's fish. I'll even give you a discount." They had just arrived at the shopping district, and as soon as they entered, Haruto was greeted warmly by almost everyone we passed. Mitsuo gave him a sideways glance, her eyes a bit suspicious. Even her mother seemed taken aback by how well Haruto was known here, looking over at him with mild surprise. Haruto greeted everyone back with a smile. He have always been the type to take the initiative in dealing with people, and today was no exception. Just picking up some essentials today. I'll definitely drop by tomorrow. My family came to visit me in Tokyo. Sure, wrap up 2 Pacific saris for me. I'll come pick them up after we finish our shopping. Back in Itamari, his hometown, he was never this outgoing. Mitsuo's expression turned even more strange. After he'd finished talking to everyone and they reached the store, she finally walked up beside him, staring at Haruto for a long time like he was some unfamiliar animal. He ignored her at first, but she kept hovering around him like an annoying fly. Eventually, he turned to look her in the face, curious what was up. "What now? You were never this friendly in Itamari, were you? What happened here, that suddenly turned you into this?" She hesitated on how to phrase it, but Haruto got the gist. Back home, he was more reserved, not cold exactly, but he kept a certain distance from people. Now in Tokyo, seeing him navigate relationships so smoothly must have seemed totally out of character. "That's what you're worried about?" Haruto went back to browsing through the shelves as he spoke, casually answering her question. In Itamori, everyone knows each other. Many are even related. If you have a problem, someone will always help. But Tokyo's different. If you don't build good relationships here, you'll be all alone when you need something. Wouldn't that be miserable? So that's what this is all about. Mitsuo gave a small nod, but cast a somewhat disdainful glance at him, probably thinking he was being a little too pragmatic. Haruto noticed her reaction but didn't bother explaining himself. She was still young. She hadn't experienced the harsh beating society could give you. Once she faced some setbacks herself, she'd understand just how important it is to manage human relationships. He tossed a few daily necessities into the shopping basket, including some things Mitsuo had wanted, and then the two of them split up from their mother. Stuff like pillows and other home items were left for their mother to handle, while Haruto and Mitsuo headed toward the section with condiments and packaged food. When they reached the prepared foods aisle, Mitsuo's eyes widened at the sight of neatly arranged bento boxes and even ready-to-eat ramen. She couldn't help but marvel again at the convenience of the city. Haruto, used to these things, looked away nonchalantly, letting her enjoy the moment of discovery. But as he casually swept his gaze across the store, something caught his eye, a familiar figure. He froze for a second, his eyes locked on a girl in the distance. Without a word, he handed the shopping basket to Mitsuo. "Stay here for a bit. I'll be right back." "Huh?" Mitsuo blinked, surprised. When she turned to look beside her, all she saw was his retreating back. She instinctively wanted to follow him but glanced at the half-selected bento box in her hand and hesitated. After a moment, she decided to stay put and continued browsing the various flavors of ready-made meals. Chapter 152, I'll take care of you. Brushing off Mitsuo, who was clinging to his side and likely to cause trouble, Haruto walked toward the familiar figure ahead. The girl was absorbed in choosing fruit, unaware of his approach. With a smile, he extended his hand toward her. Suddenly seeing an unfamiliar hand entering her peripheral vision, Shoko blinked in surprise. She followed the hand to its owner and, upon seeing Haruto's face, blinked again in recognition. "Didn't expect to run into you here. Are you out by yourself today?" Shoko gently put down the pear she had been holding and gave a small nod. She glanced around, her curious eyes lingering on him. Raising her hand to sign something, Shoko suddenly paused. She remembered that Haruto probably couldn't understand sign language. Slightly awkward, she instead pulled out a small notebook from her pocket and wrote, "I'm alone." Are you by yourself too? Not today. I'm out shopping with my family. They came from the countryside to visit me and are staying at my place. We ran out of some daily essentials, so I came to restock. Is your sister home? Thinking of the boyish girl he'd met before, Haruto's lips curved into a small smile. The girl had been protective and wary of him, clearly not a fan, but he found her endearing in a way, especially since her bold, tomboyish demeanor was so different from Mitsuo's. Yuzuru's at home, taking care of our grandmother. Yuzuru. Right, that was her name. Seeing it written jogged his memory. It had been a while since he'd last seen her, and her name had slipped his mind until now. You're out alone just to buy fruit today? His eyes flicked to the fruit display. Hueco had just been holding a pair two medium-sized Kazue pears priced at 698 yen. Even though he was already used to the ridiculous fruit prices around here, seeing it again still made his eye twitch. Narrowing his eyes at the price tag, he sighed. This was exactly why he rarely bought fruit. Kazue pears, huh? You thinking of getting these? There were 3 packs left on the shelf. When he looked at Hueco, she quickly shook her head. She had just been browsing, not seriously planning to buy. Haruto mulled it over, then picked up a box of grapes. He didn't have a basket, so he'd have to throw them into Mitsuo's later. For now, he just held onto them. My sister's still waiting for me. I should head back to her. Nishimiya's eyes darted slightly to the side, her gaze no longer on Haruto. Noticing the change in her expression, he instinctively turned to look over his shoulder and saw a familiar figure peeking from behind a shelf, clearly watching them. When the hiding figure noticed she'd been seen, she tried to duck even further, as if that would help. Haruto sighed. That big pair of curious, sparkly eyes peeking through the display racks. Sometimes he thought it was a waste for Mitsuo not to pursue comedy full-time. It was hard to believe this was the same girl who grew up to be the graceful, poised adult version he knew from the future. Stop hiding, Mitsuo. We saw you already. He called out softly. Knowing she'd been caught, Mitsuo stepped out from behind the shelves and walked over to the two. She looked at Hueco curiously. This person. Is she one of your friends, Onyai-chan? Yeah. Mitsuo, this is Hueco Nishimiya. I'm Minazu Mitsuo. His younger sister. Nice to meet you. Mitsuo smiled politely and extended her hand. Though a little shy around strangers, she was bolder with Haruto nearby. Hueco hesitated before gently reaching out and briefly touching Mitsuo's hand, her grip light and uncertain. She quickly pulled away, making Mitsuo blink in confusion. She glanced at Haruto, puzzled. Here. Take this and go find Mom. I'll meet up with you in a bit. Okay. Still unsure what had just happened, Mitsuo quietly left, sensing the subtle shift in the atmosphere. Haruto watched her go, then turned to Hueco. Sorry about that. Mitsuo can be a bit much. I hope she didn't make you uncomfortable. Hueco quickly shook her head, gesturing that it was fine. Still, something felt a little off. Mitsuo muttered later as she wandered the store, eventually finding her mother, who was still browsing household goods. Futaba picked up a strange-looking tool that wasn't sold in their hometown of Itamori. Mom, what's that? This? It can be used to squeeze the food in the package. Not something we need every day, but it's useful sometimes. A bit of a novelty item, but practical and cheap. She decided to take one home. Mitsuo had been ready to mock the purchase, but when she saw the price tag, she lost interest. Too cheap to bother commenting on. Where's Haruto? Wasn't he with you? Futaba looked around, surprised to see her son wasn't nearby. He ran into someone he knew and stayed back to talk. He'll be here soon. Someone he knew? Yeah, a really cute, quiet girl. Not sure what their relationship ow. Mitsuo yelped as someone smacked her rear. She whirled around, furious only to meet Haruto's exasperated stare. She had been just about to gossip about him, but now all the words got stuck in her throat. Just her luck. Whenever she had a conflict with this guy, she always ended up on the losing side. That girl just now, she's your acquaintance? Yeah. Haruto glanced at her, remembering how awkward Hueco had looked when she wanted to introduce herself but couldn't. Her hearing impairment must have made it difficult, especially around strangers like Mitsuo. Still, he didn't blame Mitsuo. There was no way she could have known about Hueco's condition. She's... Never mind. Telling you won't mean anything anyway. You'll be packing soon. The day after tomorrow, you're heading back. Huh? Just when she thought she was about to hear some juicy gossip, Haruto shut it down completely. Mitsuo's face scrunched up in frustration. You're the worst. He only smiled, saying nothing. He led Mitsuo and his mother to the register, checked out, and carried their bags back to the apartment. As soon as they got home, Mitsuo, still burning with curiosity, sidled up to Haruto. Hey, about Hueco, does she have some kind of secret? Don't be nosy. It's got nothing to do with you. Instead of worrying about others, maybe focus on how you're going to get into a high school in Tokyo. Ugh. You're the worst. Mitsuo had always yearned for Tokyo. Now that she'd spent some time there, experiencing its convenience and energy firsthand, her heart was more drawn to the city than ever. She found herself wanting to stay to build a life here, just like Haruto. But if she wanted to live in Tokyo like he did, she needed to achieve something real, something that could stand on its own. Letting out a small sigh, she turned her head toward her mother. Futaba was sitting quietly at the edge of the bed, gazing out the window as if lost in some far-off view. What she saw out there, Mitsuo couldn't tell. Bringing her eyes back to Haruto, Mitsuo's face twisted into a hopeless little frown. It wasn't going to be easy. But still she decided she would try. Later that evening, Setsuna dropped by. She chatted with Haruto for a bit, and when dinner time rolled around, he told her he'd be staying home instead of going to the Kira house. Setsuna was a little surprised. She glanced at Mitsuo, who clearly looked hopeful, then simply nodded and respected his decision. After bidding Futaba goodbye, she quietly took her leave. Hyuga. This place is so boring. Don't you have anything here? Not even a TV? I don't. Haruto replied flatly. Because if I had one, the NHK1 people would come knocking. Are they really that bad? Mitsuo, who had heard vague rumors about it before, looked at Haruto with obvious skepticism. Oh, they're relentless. Perfectly legal harassment if you can believe it. Unless you pay them 14,000 yen a year, they just keep showing up. Relentlessly. Hey. He didn't need to say more. Mitsuo could already imagine the hellish cycle he was describing. 14,000 yen? Per year? That's outrageous. She turned to look at her mom, sitting calmly in the room. A thought popped into her head. Wait. Do we pay for it every year back home too? We do. Futaba replied with a nod. Mitsuo's jaw practically dropped. Seeing her stunned reaction, Haruto couldn't help but chuckle softly. Snapping out of her daze, Mitsuo glared back and forth between her mother and Haruto, eyes full of betrayal. You knew? Not many people come to visit, right? When someone unfamiliar shows up and asks a few questions, it's easy to guess. Besides, did you really think you could just watch TV for free if the household didn't pay for it? I always thought it was free programming. In the countryside, there aren't many entertainment options to begin with. Watching TV is probably the most common way to pass the time. Paying a little usage fee isn't such a big deal. Oh. Mitsuo winced at the thought of over 10,000 yen going out each year, but after a moment, she realized it wasn't even her money. So she shrugged it off. With nothing better to do, she wandered over to Haruto's desk. She picked up a book at random from the pile and started flipping through it. By the way, she asked without looking up, aside from that magazine last time, haven't you submitted anything else? Nope. But you got paid for that one, didn't you? I told you already. I forgot. It was only 20,000 yen. I already used it for living expenses. Wait, that's more than enough to cover the NHK fee. Wouldn't it be better to use it to buy some fruit? Speaking of fruit, he pulled out a bunch of grapes from the shopping bag, gave them a quick rinse, and placed them on a plate. Mitsuo, who had been flipping through a book, put it down immediately and joined him at the low table. She picked up a grape and offered it first to her mother. After dinner, the three sat around quietly. With nothing to do, Mitsuo drifted over to Haruto's side. As he finished cleaning up and straightening the room, she practically leaned into him, hands resting on his shoulders, kneading gently. If you want something, just say it. No need to punish my shoulders for it. Her hands froze mid-motion. She narrowed her eyes at him with a touch of menace, but in the next instant, her expression softened into a sweet smile. Since we're not doing anything tonight, let's go out and walk around for a bit. It's already late. Most places are closing. There's nothing to see around here. Looking into her hopeful face, Haruto gently peeled her hands off his shoulders. Anywhere's fine. I feel like I'm rotting just sitting at home all day. Can we? Left with no choice, he turned to his mother for confirmation. Go ahead. Futaba said, but don't stay out too long. Big cities can be dangerous at night. Stay alert. You're not coming with us? Mitsuo asked. I'm already tired. Besides, I need to call back and check in with Yotsuya later. You two go on ahead. Oh. The moment her mom mentioned chatting with Yotsuya, Mitsuo lost interest. She'd be seeing her sister the day after tomorrow anyway. Grabbing Haruto's hand, she tugged her annoying big brother toward the front door. The sky had only recently darkened. Under the glow of the street lights, it didn't look all that different from daytime. Haruto, dressed quickly by Mitsuo and dragged out the door, looked around at the shadowy scenery. It's pitch black out here. What are you hoping to see? Come on, this is Tokyo. Shouldn't it be lively even at night? Seeing how empty the street was, Mitsuo crept closer and hugged his arm. Even with the street lamps, the shadowy alleys and silence made her uneasy. Her heart started to race, and she instinctively sought comfort by clinging to him. Sure, Tokyo's lively, but that's downtown. This is a residential area. People are tired after working all day. You want to take away even their chance to rest? I didn't know you were so cruel. That's not what I meant. Her cheeks puffed in frustration. She wanted to be mad, but didn't have a good comeback. Sighing, she looked around again. How far is your school from here? Why? I want to see what it looks like. You're interested in a school? In the middle of the night? Can I? Mitsuo's eyes sparkled as she looked up at him, completely serious. Haruto knew her well enough by now to realize if he said no, she might just throw a tantrum right then and there. The gates are probably locked. We can only see it from outside. But if that's okay, then sure. Otherwise, just wait until tomorrow. Let's go. Just seeing where he studied would be enough. Who cared if it was from outside the fence? And besides, even if the gate was locked, there's always the option of climbing. Seeing how her mood had instantly lifted, he didn't bother to object. He quietly let her cling to his arm and led the way. It normally took 10 minutes during the day, but in the dark, it took them nearly 20 to reach Toyosaki High School. The moment Mitsuo saw the sleek, modern private school so different from her own, her eyes lit up with admiration. So this is a city high school. It's totally different from Itamari's. Just standing here feels kind of magical. What's it like inside? Yeah. It's not like your school. I knew it. City schools are on a different level. Back home, the track is just some scattered gravel. But this, it looks brand new and super professional. The front gate was locked, but they walked around the fence to the athletic field. Mitsuo's eyes sparkled with longing as she looked through the bars. When you get to high school, Haruto said quietly, if your grades are good enough, I'll talk to Dad. Try to convince him to let you come study in Tokyo. Really? She turned her head in surprise, looking up at him. There was no light nearby, only moonlight illuminated Haruto's vague silhouette. Mitsuo wasn't sure if he'd actually keep that promise. By then, I'll be able to cover my own living expenses. Even your tuition wouldn't be a problem. So even if the family disagrees, it won't matter. You swear you'll do it? Of course. Humphrey. Then I'll definitely make it happen. Good. I'll be looking forward to it. Chapter 153, How long can you last? On the morning of the 6th day, knowing it would take time to get home, Mitsuo, reluctant as she was woken up early by her mother. The two of them caught the 9 a.m. Shinkansen back. Standing quietly in the station, watching his family disappear into the sea of people, Haruto didn't say a word. His eyes lingered on the direction they vanished until, after a long pause, he turned with the rest of the crowd and headed toward the subway, eventually returning to his apartment. The moment he stepped inside, the silence hit him. No more Mitsuo's voice echoing in the space. It felt a bit lonely. He wandered into the room and collapsed onto his bed, which still faintly held the scent of home. Burying his face into the sheets, he began recalling his days in Itamari, and an unexpected wave of nostalgia washed over him. He lay there for a good 7 or 8 minutes before finally sitting up slowly, dragging himself to his desk. Pulling out his chair and opening the drawer, he muttered to himself, didn't get much writing done this whole break. Might as well use today to catch up, since there's nothing else going on. For lunch, he made some simple udon to fill his stomach, then went right back to his desk, scribbling and thinking endlessly. It wasn't until 2 p.m. when the doorbell rang, snapping him out of his daze. He walked to the door and opened it only to find Setsuna standing there. With a long exhale, he stepped aside. Come in. She entered silently. Seeing the empty room, she immediately understood Mitsuo and his mother had already left Tokyo. They left this morning? Yeah, around 9. I forgot to tell you. Are they back in Itamari already? Probably not yet. At this time, they're likely passing through Nagoya, transferring trains toward Gifu. Might be a while before they actually get home. If someone's picking them up by car, then maybe sooner. He mentally calculated the route. They were probably already on the train from Nagoya to Itamari. As for whether they'd arrived in Itamari, he couldn't say for sure, but most likely not yet. If they had arrived, they'd have messaged me by now. So, no news means they're still en route. After hearing his explanation, Setsuna silently stepped closer to him. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around him. Haruto, still drinking water, felt the impact of her sudden embrace. Looking down, he saw her face, her eyes filled with a quiet yearning. He set the cup down, gently placing a hand on her cheek, stroking it softly. What's wrong? I want to. Want what? Her cheeks flushed red. She looked up at him, and tiptoed closer. Meanwhile, Sakai had been holed up in her home for 3 days straight. Other than helping out at her mom's restaurant around noon and dinner time, she'd spent her hours zoning out in her room, completely unsure of what to do with herself. They probably left by now. Even if they were just visiting, they should have gone back. School starts again tomorrow, after all. Muttering to herself, Sakai sat on her bed with her arms around her knees, rocking slightly. She glanced toward the window, then crawled over to the edge, kneeling on her bed to look out in the direction of Haruto's apartment. Today was the last day of break. Starting tomorrow, everything would return to normal. The next vacation wouldn't come until summer, which still felt ages away. Not to mention, the actual holiday schedule wasn't confirmed yet and different schools had different timelines. Sakai had no idea how many overlapping days off she and Haruto would even get. He'll probably go back to Itamori for summer too. Which means he won't be in Tokyo long. And with Setsuna still around, the time I get to spend with him is going to be even less. I wonder what he's doing right now. The loneliness gnawed at her, threatening to consume her entirely. Biting her lip, Sakai felt she couldn't stay home any longer. She flipped off her bed, strode to her wardrobe, and carefully picked out an outfit something she thought Haruto would like. Then, without a second thought, she walked out the door. The empty living room offered no clues about when her mom would be back. She didn't bother leaving a note. She figured she'd definitely return before her mom did. Bang, the door shut behind her. She locked it and began walking toward Haruto's apartment. During the 20-minute walk, Sakai thought over what to say if she ran into his family. What should she call them? Auntie? Or maybe. The thought left her slightly flustered. She climbed the stairs slowly, finally stopping at Haruto's door. Hesitating for just a moment, she raised her hand and pressed the doorbell. Inside, Haruto, who was just catching his breath, glanced at the girl beside him. Setsuna opened her right eye lazily and looked at him without saying a word. He reached over to grab his shirt, throwing it on casually. After pulling on his pants, he made his way to the door, slid the security chain into place, and cracked it open to peek outside. Haruto? Sakai. Come in. He unlatched the chain and opened the door fully to let her in. As Sakai bent down to take off her shoes, she spotted another pair of shoes at the door. Not Haruto's. She glanced up into the room, and there they were, two pale, slender feet, playfully kicking back and forth on his bed. She instantly knew who they belonged to. Still standing at the entrance, Sakai looked down at her carefully chosen outfit, then back into the room at Haruto and Setsuna. Her lips pressed tightly together. And then, with eyes full of resolve, she walked inside. If Setsuna could accept this and do these things, then she had no reason to back down either. 30 minutes later. Wait. Hold on, stop for a second. What's wrong? I need a break. Setsuna, can you take over? I'm still resting. But I already. No. Wait. As dusk approached, Haruto turned on the light in his room. Sakai lay on the bed, silently glancing at the girl beside her, Setsuna. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Sakai averted her gaze, slowly sat up, and looked toward Haruto, who was sitting at his desk. School starts tomorrow. From this month on, things are going to get a lot busier, right? Haruto turned around upon hearing the voice. Setsuna hadn't spoken in a while, so he assumed the question had come from Sakai, and he was right. After a short pause, he nodded. The month of April had been something of an adjustment period. But now that May was here, things were about to ramp up. Studies would get more demanding, and free time would shrink. It definitely won't be as easy as April. We've got May and June, then the summer break starts in July, just 2 months away. Watching Haruto work at his desk, Sakai slipped on her clothes and quietly walked over to him. Her eyes fell on the pages spread out before him, but she couldn't make much sense of them. Without saying a word, she wrapped her arms around his shoulders from behind. Setsuna, still lying on the bed, narrowed her eyes. She stared coldly at Sakai's arms wrapped around Haruto, sharp as needles, but she said nothing. After a moment, she simply closed her eyes again, as if choosing peace over pettiness. Haruto glanced to the side at the girl clinging to him. He wasn't sure what was going through her mind, but understanding how emotional girls could be, he didn't interrupt her either. I'll head home. My mom's probably going to be back soon. Sakai loosened her arms and glanced back. Hearing her get ready to leave, Setsuna opened her eyes and locked eyes with Sakai. Sakai suddenly smiled. See you tomorrow morning, Setsuna. Yeah. Sakai walked to the door, fully dressed. The sound of the door opening, then closing, echoed through the room. Silence returned. Haruto looked toward the door briefly, then resumed his writing. Setsuna also closed her eyes again, resting in the quiet room. After some time, the bedroom door slowly creaked open. Haruto stepped out of Mai's room, feeling completely drained once again. As he spotted Setsuna calmly sitting in the living room, he dragged himself over and took a seat beside her. Your family probably won't be visiting Tokyo again before summer break, right? Mai stepped out of the room, her long hair tied up, and looked at Haruto already seated in the living room. Not unless there's something urgent. Why? Planning to have another heart-to-heart with my mom? If I wanted to chat, we wouldn't need to meet in person. I already exchanged email addresses with her. We can keep in touch that way. Meeting in person. Well, I doubt you'd want your mom to find out what her son's been up to, right? Mai shot a glance at Setsuna sitting beside him. She didn't spell it out, not wanting to stir up unnecessary tension with her daughter. Haruto hadn't expected Mai to bring up the topic so openly. But she wasn't wrong, he didn't want his family finding out either. If Setsuna hadn't discovered it herself, he and Mai probably would have taken this secret to their graves. You're right. Let's drop the subject. My family likely won't come to Tokyo before summer. And once summer comes, I'll head back to Itamori for a while. No need to worry about them bumping into us. Going back home, huh? Mai's gaze lingered on him. Haruto responded with a faintly exasperated look. If you'd like, you can come visit. My family home's way bigger than my apartment, having a few more people around wouldn't be an issue. I'll think about it. She glanced at her daughter, not giving a straight answer. If Haruto planned to return to Itamori, there was a high chance Setsuna would go with him. Left home alone, Mai figured it might not be such a bad idea to take time off and join them. Seeing Mai fall into thought, he turned to Setsuna beside him. Want to come with me to Itamori for summer break? She nodded without a second's hesitation. Then it's settled. You'll come with me. For now, let's just wait a bit longer. 2 months it wasn't long, but it wasn't exactly short either. After confirming their plans, Haruto rested in the living room a little longer before heading back to his apartment. Once inside, he took a shower and lay down on his bed only for his phone to buzz almost immediately. He glanced at it, then picked up. Asleep? Just about to. You home? It was Mitsua's voice, lively and spirited. He couldn't help but suspect she'd taken a nap after getting home and only just remembered to call. Yeah, been home since this afternoon. Forgot to call you. Oh, I left some stuff at your place, handle it however you want. What stuff? Haruto glanced around but didn't notice anything out of place. In the bathroom. Actually, just let your girlfriend use it. No point in wasting it. He had a pretty good idea of what she meant. Her sense of humor was, apparently, still going strong. Whatever. I'm going to sleep. Don't waste my time. Oh, and Yatsua loved the gift you got her. Grandma got hers too, she wanted to know when you'll be back. I've got school. The only time I can go back is during summer. I'll head home then. Got it. I'll let them know. Anything else? Good night. Yeah. Good night. It caught him off guard that Mitsuo would say good night, but he replied anyway before ending the call. Staring at the faint glow of the ceiling, he slowly closed his eyes. I'm heading to Tokyo for school. I probably won't be back in Itamori for a long time. If anything happens, write me a letter, okay? Just. Whether I will reply depends on whether I have time. The face in front of him was blurry, like a smudge in his memory. Haruto tried to focus, to remember what she looked like. But the closer he got, the more her figure dissolved into mist. I get it. Life in Tokyo's probably going to be intense. School comes first, that's fair. I usually appreciate how mature and calm you are, but at times like this, it's a little frustrating, you know? The face leaned in closer only to reveal nothing but pitch blackness. A hollow void. Haruto jolted awake. He stared out the window at the bright morning sun and chirping birds. Rubbing his temples, he sat up with a long, heavy sigh. That dream. It's from way back, isn't it? It had been more than 10 years. Her face had faded into the blur of time. Only her name remained crystal clear, Fujikana no. She was the older girl who used to live next door, cheerful, outgoing, completely different from him in every way. And yet, somehow, they'd always gotten along. After graduating high school, she had moved to Tokyo for university. They had promised to keep in touch through letters, but not long after she left, the letters he sent started coming back, marked as undeliverable. It's been quite a while since then. What, 3 years? Yeah. She left right after graduating, so that must have been. As he recalled the details, a complex expression surfaced on his face. He fell silent for a while, then let out another quiet sigh before getting out of bed. After slipping into his clothes, he made his way to the bathroom. A quick wash-up, a bit of grooming, and he was already preparing breakfast. He went through his morning routine in silence, tidying his room with practiced ease. Once the simple breakfast was ready, he ate alone, wordlessly. Then he left the used dishes in the sink, slung his bag over his shoulder, and stepped out of the apartment, choosing not to think about that dream any further. Your family came to Tokyo over the break, didn't they? He had just arrived at school and taken his seat when Ariri approached him. She leaned casually on his desk with one hand, throwing him an unexpectedly pointed question. He had thought Ariri helped the lost Mimizu Futaba because she recognized his mother. But now, it didn't seem like that was the case. You've met them before, haven't you? Huh? My mom. And my little sister. You've seen them, right? Well, I have. But that was, 7 or 8 years in the future. No way I'd remember exactly what they looked like now. Her eyes widened slightly. So that woman the other day. That was your mom? Chapter 154, the cool-headed editor and the inexperienced high school author. The golden-haired, twin-tailed girl couldn't help but bare her small fangs as she gave the fool before her a pointed look. Her sharp eyes scanned Haruto from head to toe. Yet as more and more students poured into the classroom, she reluctantly clicked her tongue and backed off for now. Mouthing a few words at him, something like a playful threat, she then returned to her own seat. Haruto, the one being threatened, simply watched her leave with indifference before closing his eyes quietly at his desk. The fact that the person he was dating didn't attend the same school as him weighed on his mind with a faint sense of helplessness. During breaks, he often found himself with nothing to do, unable to spend his time enjoying youthful romance like the others. All he could do was sit quietly, watching the way his classmates overflowed with energy, flipping through a convenience store magazine he had picked up without much thought. New film script contest. A headline caught his eye. Haruto paused, his gaze lingering over the article, reading it carefully. Grand prize, 5 million yen. His eyes hovered over the prize amount for a while before he folded the magazine neatly and slipped it into the desk drawer. Even though he went back to sitting still, a tiny spark had ignited somewhere inside him. The school day dragged on in its usual dullness. When the final bell rang, Haruto lingered briefly in the astronomy club room before heading home alone, once again reminded that he and Setsuna went to different schools and couldn't walk home together. That evening, Haruto made a decision: he would dedicate 3 hours every day solely to writing. Maybe he was unusually talented when it came to crafting these tragic, grounded stories, because once he started, he felt no signs of writer's block at all. His output was astonishing, around 3,000 words an hour. As of now, he had already written close to 70,000 words. Normally, that would be enough for a full-length novel. But Haruto didn't feel like the story was ready to end just yet. He estimated he'd probably wrap it up at around 100,000 words. At his current pace, that meant he could finish within a week. The story itself is coming along fine. The real challenge is what happens after it's done, submitting it somewhere. He muttered to himself. Winning one of the big competitions was out of the question for someone like him. Realistically, his best shot would be one of the smaller, more accessible newcomer awards hosted by publishing houses or light novel labels. Sitting alone in his room, Haruto pulled out his phone. Although the internet wasn't as fast and sleek as it would be in the future, browsing was no issue. He opened up the browser and started checking out various submission deadlines and award schedules. The results were disappointing. Most of the contests had ridiculously long waiting periods. Some wouldn't even announce results until summer break. That's way too slow. Not what I had in mind. He sighed. Even if I submit to one of these, by the time they get around to judging, my momentum will be long gone. It was then that he remembered something. Mai had once given him a business card. Pulling open his desk drawer, he rummaged through the contents. During a family visit not long ago, he had hidden away certain ahem materials, all of which had ended up being used up in yesterday's ordeal. He casually flipped through the remnants and quickly found the card he was looking for. He held it up to the light, studying the name and company printed on it, Sakura Publishing, Mari Kazuka. Setting the card down carefully so it wouldn't be blown away, Haruto weighed it down with a pen holder, then closed the drawer and sat back at his desk to resume writing. By the time May rolled around, even though Futaba Ryo had said she'd be getting busier, Haruto still found her waiting for him every day in the same familiar lab room at lunchtime. They sat together, chatting about whatever came to mind, almost as if nothing had changed. Sometimes, Ryo would casually ask about how things were going between Haruto and Setsuna, but after asking, she'd always lapse into a brief, pensive silence. Meanwhile, in the classroom, Akiko would occasionally strike up conversations with Haruto, but their interactions had grown noticeably less warm. The change didn't go unnoticed. Whispers started circulating among the students, speculating about the distance between them, but those rumors eventually faded away. As for Iriri, the two of them kept their distance both during school and outside it. The only real interaction between them was the occasional fleeting moment when their eyes would meet, usually when Haruto was zoning out. Thus, time continued its slow, steady flow. The seasons shifted. The days grew warmer, and soon it would be time to change into summer uniforms. The boys in the class were practically buzzing with excitement, eager for any excuse to glimpse more bare skin and delicate limbs. Haruto, on the other hand, was consumed by thoughts of his almost finished manuscript and how to finally make contact with the editor whose business card now sat on his desk. Sakura Publishing seemed more focused on magazines, not books, so if he were just pitching a short piece or an article, it would have been simple. But publishing a full novel was an entirely different process. Still, if I don't try, I'll just stay stuck in the same place forever. That Friday, after returning home to his small apartment, Haruto steeled himself. He picked up the business card once more, stared at it for a long moment and then dialed the number printed on it. Ring ring ring. He stood there silently, waiting as the dial tone stretched on endlessly. 10 seconds passed. Still no answer. Haruto exhaled a faint sigh but kept waiting patiently. 1 minute passed. Still, no one picked up. Just as he was about to hang up, "Hello, this is Mari Kazuka. May I ask what this is regarding?" Just when Haruto had given up hope that anyone would answer, and was already considering submitting to other publishers, a crisp, professional woman's voice came from the other end of the line. Even without seeing her, just from her voice, Haruto could already picture a sharp, capable woman in his mind. "My name is Mimizu Haruto. I'd like to discuss a submission with you, Miss Fukuoka. Would you have a moment?" A submission? At her desk at the editing office, Mari frowned instinctively. An unfamiliar number, an unfamiliar name, someone she didn't know suddenly reaching out, talking about a submission. Her editor's instincts told her it wasn't worth paying much attention. From the sound of his voice still rough and uneven from puberty, it was easy to imagine a high school student who had somehow stumbled upon her contact information, hoping to get his work published in a magazine. Of course, the magazine did accept submissions, and occasionally published them, but those were all carefully selected by the editorial team, or requested from well-known writers they personally invited. Mari had dealt with eager newcomers before, but usually through the company's main line, not her personal number. This situation was rare. "If you have a submission, you can send it directly to our publishing office. Is there anything else?" Her reply was brisk and to the point, exactly as Haruto expected. Someone like him, reaching out of the blue, wasn't going to be welcomed with open arms. Right now, the name Mimizu Haruto carried no weight whatsoever. "No, I think there might be a misunderstanding. What I want to submit isn't just a short piece for the magazine, it's a full manuscript. A novel." "A novel?" Mari couldn't help but feel slightly amused. A manuscript was a manuscript. What made his any different? Is there something special about it? Not especially. It's just that I'm not talking about a short contribution to your magazine. I'm talking about publishing an actual book. As she lowered her eyes to the papers on her desk, thinking of how best to politely decline, Mari paused for a moment. "A book, you say?" "Yes. I see." She glanced at the delicate lady's watch on her wrist. Almost time to clock out. Mari was diligent about her work but had no particular love for overtime. Seeing that she had no more urgent tasks today, she asked if Haruto was available tomorrow. "Mr. Mimizu, was it?" "Yes, Mimizu Haruto." "Then, Mr. Mimizu, are you free tomorrow?" "I'm free starting from noon." "Noon? That works. Bring your manuscript to our publishing office around noon tomorrow. Tell the front desk you're here to see me. Is that all right?" Haruto, who had braced himself for a longer negotiation, was honestly surprised at how smoothly things went. "No problem. All right then, I'll see you tomorrow." With that, she promptly hung up. Haruto, who had been about to say, "Thank you for your time," found himself cut off by the dead tone of the disconnected call. Still, having dealt with various editors before, Haruto wasn't particularly bothered. He casually set his phone down beside him, sat on the edge of his bed, and made a mental note, "Noon tomorrow." Satisfied he wouldn't forget, Haruto closed his eyes and stretched out on his bed. That night, over dinner at the Kira household, Haruto brought up a question. What kind of person is Mari Kazuka? He wanted to be prepared before meeting her, so he figured it would help to know what kind of personality she had. At his question, Mai gave him a suspicious look, clearly wondering why he was suddenly asking about such a thing. "I'm meeting her tomorrow at her office to talk about my manuscript. I thought I'd get some insight into what she's like so I can prepare myself," Haruto explained calmly, waiting for her answer. "I see. It's about the book, then." Mai nodded, seemingly convinced, and didn't ask further. She thought for a moment before speaking. "Honestly, I don't know her that well either. I only met her through work once. But if I had to describe her, she gives off the vibe of a career woman. A real workaholic." "A workaholic?" "Yeah, definitely." Mai nodded seriously and continued. "I won't bore you with all the ordinary details. Long story short, she's very meticulous. During the time we worked together, There was even a night past 10 p.m. when she sent me an email asking about a tiny work-related issue. At the time, I was already fast asleep. It wasn't until the next morning, when the other party called to confirm, that I even noticed the email at all. And then? What do you mean, and then? Isn't that enough? Seated across from each other, Haruto and Mai stared blankly into each other's eyes. Meanwhile, Setsuna, who was sitting beside Haruto, glanced at him with a curious expression. So? The publication? Does that mean the work is finished? At Setsuna's question, Haruto withdrew his gaze from Mai and turned to his girlfriend, nodding lightly. Yeah, it's done. The next step is the actual release. And the meeting is tomorrow? Good luck. Hearing her quiet encouragement, Haruto smiled and nodded again. Thanks. When he got home, he quickly showered, changed into his pajamas, and threw himself into bed for some rest. The next morning, before heading out, he carefully packed his manuscript into his bag, ready to go straight to the publishing house after school. Sitting in the classroom, Haruto found that something as ordinary as attending lessons suddenly felt almost unbearable. His fingers tapped restlessly against his notebook. Thankfully, the sound was faint enough not to draw attention. He barely endured until noon. The moment the bell rang, he rushed out of the classroom without a second thought. Eri, who had just stood up, caught a glimpse of his disappearing figure at the back door, and sighed. She had wanted to talk to him. Exiting the school gates, Haruto made a beeline to the subway station. He boarded the train and headed toward the publisher, Sakura Publishing. It wasn't hard to find. Their official website had the address clearly listed. Miss Fukuoka, it's already noon. Aren't you going to take a break? In the publishing office, lunchtime had arrived. Most of the staff had left their desks in small groups, heading off to relax and grab food. Only Mari Kazuka remained at her desk, still focused on the documents in front of her. The newly hired assistant, Suzuki, hesitated before speaking. Mari's workaholic intensity had already left quite an impression. It's noon already? Mari finally lifted her head, blinking as she glanced at the clock on the wall. She vaguely recalled that before leaving work yesterday, she had arranged to meet someone around lunchtime today. Closing her file, Mari turned to Suzuki with a question. Has anyone come looking for me? Probably a young boy? No. No one. Suzuki's eyes widened slightly. Mari Kazuka, who practically lived at her desk, asking about someone. Could it be your boyfriend? Suzuki blurted out. Huh? Boyfriend? No way. How could I possibly have time for that with all this work? Mari shook her head emphatically. But then. Kazuka-senpai, you. Never mind. Mari smiled dryly at her junior's awkwardness. Just say whatever's on your mind. Hiding it only makes it more suspicious. Sorry. Nothing to apologize for. Mari said, rising from her seat. If no one's come yet, then it's fine. I should grab lunch myself. Thanks for your hard work. As Mari stood, ready to head to the company cafeteria, the phone on her desk rang sharply. She glanced at the caller ID, picked it up without hesitation, and spoke briskly. Yes, this is Mari Kazuka. Got it. I'll be right there. Please show him to the meeting room first. Hanging up, Mari turned back to Suzuki with a faint smile. That call. Was it from that boy? Yeah. Work-related? He's here to submit a manuscript. I'll go meet him. Good luck. Suzuki watched Mari's retreating back with admiration and relief. Without Mari's intense presence, the office somehow felt much lighter. Kazuka-senpai's pressure was really something else. After arriving at the publisher, Haruto approached the front desk and gave Mari Kazuka's name. The receptionist made a quick call for confirmation, then led Haruto to a waiting room, where they left him with a glass of hot water. Haruto stared at the water absent-mindedly, wondering if, on his next visit, they might offer coffee or tea instead. Clack! The door to the waiting room opened, snapping Haruto out of his thoughts. A woman in sleek black stockings and a sharp black business suit stepped into the room. Her gaze immediately locked onto Haruto. I'm Mari Kazuka. You must be Mimizu? Mimizu Haruto. I figured you were probably a student, but I wasn't expecting you to be quite this handsome. She said lightly. A bit of a surprise. Then, her tone shifted to business. Alright. Your manuscript? Haruto pulled out the carefully organized pages from his bag and handed them to her. Mari raised an eyebrow slightly, pleasantly surprised to see a handwritten manuscript in an era dominated by laptops and typing. Please, have a seat. I'll take a look. She said. Take your time. Haruto replied politely. Chapter 155, The Boy in Room 106. Mari flipped open the thick manuscript in front of her. It was already well past lunchtime, and she hadn't eaten yet. Her original plan was simple, skim through the boy's work just enough to grasp the gist of it, give him a polite response, and then head to the cafeteria for her usual quiet meal. Boys his age, it was nothing new. They often mistook a few television shows or some self-help books for life experience. And after soaking in a bit of that cheap wisdom, they began to believe they had some kind of innate talent. It happened all the time. The young man sitting across from her, still dressed in his high school uniform, was probably no different. Handsome, no doubt often praised by those around him, it was easy to imagine how his confidence had swelled, convincing himself he could write something truly worth reading. A handsome young genius writer, Mari thought wryly. The kind of headline you saw on TV to draw viewers in. She had no expectations. Her only thought was to brush him off quickly, let him down gently from his unrealistic dreams, and then go enjoy her meal alone in peace. Lowering her gaze to the manuscript, Mari began to read, her mood slightly sour. She didn't deny the existence of true prodigies in the world, but they were rare, few and far between. The chances of one sitting across from her today? Slim to none. She flipped through page after page, at first casual, barely skimming. But gradually, her posture straightened. Her fingers slowed. Her lazy attitude faded, replaced by a focused, upright seriousness. Her face occasionally showed subtle signs of deep thought. At one point, Mari lifted her head slowly and looked at the boy sitting quietly across from her. Haruto, holding a paper cup in his hands, noticed her gaze. He offered a gentle, serene smile, a smile as soft and warm as a spring breeze. Mari's heart gave a sudden, involuntary jolt. Doubt flickered in her mind, but alongside it bloomed a rare, fluttering sensation. A woman who had never known love, who had buried herself in her work for years, suddenly found her cheeks flushing a soft pink. Raising her left hand, she pressed it lightly against her lips, shielding herself from Haruto's clear, unwavering eyes. She lowered her gaze quickly, ashamed of her sudden girlish stirrings, and forced herself to continue reading. Half an hour passed. An hour. 2 hours. The lunch break had long since ended. Suzuki, who had come by to remind her of work matters, was quietly sent away with instructions to handle things for the time being. Mari sat there, completely absorbed, reading the manuscript from beginning to end without pause. Only when she finally closed the last page did she knit her brows tightly and lift her eyes to meet the boy sitting across from her once more. Is the story based on something you actually experienced? No, not exactly. Haruto replied. I just happened to encounter a few scenes on the street that were similar to what I wrote about. I also mixed in some of the rumors I hear at school. That's where the inspiration came from. Is there a problem? Facing the confused boy, Mari slowly shook her head. It wasn't the story she had a problem with, it was him. She hadn't expected that she would meet a real genius like this in person. She always thought geniuses were rare creatures you only heard about. No problem. Mari said, smiling faintly. From the manuscript, I can tell just how much effort you poured into this. It's very impressive. Thank you. Haruto said simply. Then, about the publishing? Publishing shouldn't be an issue. Mari said, resting her hand lightly on the papers. But it will take a bit of time. I'll need to discuss it with the editor-in-chief and some others first. I can't give you an immediate answer. I understand. He accepted her response without surprise, as if he had expected it all along. His calmness caught Mari slightly off guard. She started. Looking at the boy Haruto, she remembered sitting there so quietly. Mari took a moment to gather herself before asking something she couldn't suppress. This is just out of personal curiosity, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but why didn't you submit this to a larger publisher? Places like Kodansha or Shueisha would probably jump at the chance to work with someone like you. Why choose us, a smaller company like Sakura Publishing? It was a common question asked to promising newcomers. Haruto thought for a moment, then answered honestly. Probably because I happen to have your business card. My business card? My neighbor, Micra, knew I was working on something, so she gave me your card. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier. I see. Micra, huh? Mari smiled softly. Well, no need to apologize. If anything, you've done me a favor. Alright, let me go make a copy of your manuscript. Please wait here for a moment. Haruto nodded. He watched Mari leave the meeting room, then waited quietly, alone. About 20 minutes later, Mari returned, handing back his original manuscript and promising to get back to him soon. I'll discuss it with the editor-in-chief right away, she said. This piece is too good to ignore. I'm sure he'll agree. I understand. In that case, I'll take my leave. They both stood, exchanged polite bows, and Haruto left the Sakura Publishing office. Alone now, he wandered to a nearby shopping street and found a quiet izakaya. Sitting down, he ordered a few simple dishes. He hadn't eaten anything since noon, only a glass of water, and now, deep into the afternoon, hunger gnawed at him. Fortunately, the place was nearly empty, with only him as a customer. After satisfying his stomach with a quick meal, he paid the bill and headed back to his apartment. Still feeling a bit restless, he decided to visit the Kira house next door. There, he found Setsuna sitting with Sekai. Without a second thought, he walked straight up to Setsuna, pulled her into his arms, and sat down with her on his lap. "Did something happen?" Setsuna asked, tilting her head up at him, puzzled. "No, not really," he said, pausing. Well, I guess something did happen." At first he instinctively denied it, but thinking back over the day, he realized it wasn't entirely true. But today had just been a preliminary conversation. Nothing was finalized yet. Was it even worth mentioning? "I'll tell you guys once it's settled," he said. That answer only piqued Sekai's curiosity further. She blinked at him, then glanced at Setsuna, noticing the thoughtful look on her face. Clearly, Setsuna had some idea what was going on, and that only made Sekai more eager to know. "What is it?" "Writing," he said simply. "The book I've been working on is finally finished. I'm trying to get it published." "Published? Like, you'll be a real author?" "I have to get it published first. I'm not an author yet." He chuckled softly at her excitement. As he sat there, he absent-mindedly kicked his legs a little, causing Setsuna, still perched on his lap, to bob up and down slightly. Feeling her shift, he averted his gaze awkwardly, sneaking a glance at Sekai. Fortunately, Sekai was too caught up in her own thoughts about publication and being an author to notice anything odd. "Will there be interviews?" she asked eagerly. "Maybe, maybe not," he replied. "Depends on whether people are even interested in buying the book." "What's the title?" "I have one in mind," he said, "but it's not finalized yet. I'll need to discuss it with the publisher." "You can't decide it yourself?" "Not really. Once you get picked up by a publisher, especially as a newcomer with no awards, they have a lot of say in everything." "I see." Sekai nodded, realizing it was more complicated than she'd thought. She had always imagined that writers could do whatever they wanted. Meanwhile, Setsuna stayed quiet, deep in thought. If his book was published, she wondered silently, how many copies should she buy to show her support? That night, after leaving the Kira house, Haruto was walking home when his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a call from Mari Kazuka. "Hello, Mimizu-kun?" "Yes, Ms. Kazuka. Is something wrong?" "Sorry to call you so late. Are you free right now?" "I'd like to discuss something." "Of course. Is it about the book?" Sitting in her office, Mari took a sip of her now cold coffee and smiled. "Yes. After reviewing it, the editor-in-chief agrees it's very polished. There aren't really any major changes needed. He asked me to talk to you about the contract. Would you be available tomorrow or the day after?" "I'm free tomorrow." "The day after?" "I have school." "Of course you're still a student. Then let's meet tomorrow afternoon. I'll prepare the contract tonight." "Understood. All right. I'll let you get back to your evening." "Thank you." "Thank you." After hanging up, a smile unconsciously tugged at Haruto's lips. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and walked home, feeling lighter somehow. That night, lying in bed, he had one of the best dreams he could remember. The next morning, he woke up feeling refreshed. Pulling aside the curtains, he stared out at the clear sky, let out a long breath, and made his way to the bathroom. After going through his usual routine, he ate a simple breakfast, but couldn't settle down afterward. Knowing he had important business later in the day, he decided to leave the house early. He wandered into the manga cafe he had visited a few times before. Standing outside, he hesitated, wondering if the girl he had met there before might still be inside. "It's around her break time," he thought. "But I don't know if she's working today." After standing at the entrance for a moment, he stepped inside the shop. Without renting a private room, he simply paid for access to the general hall, picked a quiet corner, and selected 2 manga volumes to read quietly. By the time noon arrived, it was about the right time. In the afternoon, he planned to head straight to the publisher. Once the discussions were settled, he could go home and rest while waiting for news about the release. No. There will probably be a lot more negotiations after that, he thought to himself. Glancing at the manga in his hands, stories related to the manga industry, he couldn't help but start drawing parallels to his own publishing journey. He closed his eyes in thought. Excuse me, Mimizu-kun?" A girl's voice sounded by his ear. Haruto slowly opened his eyes and found a familiar figure standing before him. Mido Yuka. The girl who had inspired him, the model for one of his characters. "Ah, Mido-san, right? Just call me Yuka. I didn't expect to run into you here, Mimizu-kun." Seeing her again caught Haruto off guard. He had only come here on a whim, hoping to get lucky, and somehow, He actually bumped into her. He closed the manga in his hand with a casual motion, a faint smile appearing on his face as he looked at her. I'm surprised too. Honestly, I just thought I'd try my luck. Didn't think I'd really see you again. You were looking for me? Kind of. I didn't know anything about you, not even how to find you, so I figured I'd just come by and see. You don't look like you got much sleep last night, though. The heavy dark circles under her eyes caught Haruto's attention. It's because of my night shifts. Hyuga said with a small, tired laugh. My main job doesn't pay enough, so I picked up a few side jobs. I even considered selling my body, but after meeting you the other day, I gave up on that idea. The long-haired girl moved closer to him. Mind if I sit here? Of course not. Since Haruto didn't object, Hyuga smiled and sat down beside him, keeping a small but careful distance between them. Sitting next to him, she felt her whole body relax slightly, a rare feeling of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. Are you off to date too? She asked. Yeah, just wandering around by myself. Didn't have anything particular to do, so I came here to kill time. Manga, huh? I didn't know what to pick, so I just grabbed 2 volumes at random. Have you read these before? Not really. I don't have much time to read manga. When I do, it's usually shoujo manga. She said, glancing at the volumes Haruto had chosen. They looked vaguely familiar to her, but she hadn't read them herself. They're manga about making manga. Pretty technical stuff. If someone's interested in the industry, they're a good read. Are you interested in the manga industry, Memizu-kun? Hyuga seemed a little surprised by his explanation, glancing at him curiously. Manga? Not really. Haruto admitted. I've learned some basics, but I'm not particularly talented. Becoming a mangaka, or working in the industry. It doesn't seem very realistic for me. For now, I'm still just a student. The future? Well, that depends. The future, huh? Once, when she was still in elementary and middle school, Hyuga might have looked forward to the future too. Back then, she didn't understand why so many people around her gave up on their dreams, why so many seemed so numb and grounded in harsh reality. It wasn't until her family's situation crumbled, until her parents, crushed by financial pressure, chose to end their own lives, that she realized how fragile everything really was. Struggling to survive alone, she finally understood that life wasn't smooth or simple, not at all like she once imagined. Under all that crushing pressure, even the act of thinking about the future became a luxury she could barely afford. She knew better than anyone that her body wouldn't last if she kept living like this. But still. Will you be coming here often from now on? Haruto asked. Hyuga looked confused by the sudden question, but she smiled a little and answered. I'm always around here. I don't really have anywhere else to go. I've got some things coming up soon. Haruto said thoughtfully, and I might be able to help you a little. But I don't know how to get in touch. Room 106. That's my home. If you need me, just knock. If I'm there, I'll answer. Got it. Haruto made a mental note of her room number. They kept chatting after that, about the manga here, about school, carefully avoiding the heavier topic of daily life struggles. When lunchtime came, Hyuga insisted he order something, saying she'd treat him. Haruto had initially planned to refuse, but when he saw her smiling, he paused, then smiled back and ordered a simple curry. They shared lunch together, side by side. Afterwards, since he needed to go sign his contract, he said his goodbyes to Hyuga and headed toward the publisher's office. When he arrived and mentioned Mari Kazuka's name, he was led straight back to the same meeting room as yesterday. Chapter 156, I suggest you wipe it off first. Have you had lunch yet? As soon as he entered the meeting room, he spotted Mari Kazuka already seated inside. Beside her sat an unfamiliar woman, wearing glasses and giving off a somewhat inexperienced vibe, likely a junior staff member from the publishing company. Haruto gave her a polite smile before walking over and sitting down across from Mari. I ate before coming. Shall we get started? This is the publishing contract. There's no issue with the manuscript itself. In fact, the editor-in-chief holds your work in quite high regard. As a result, they're offering you a very favorable contract for a newcomer. Please take your time reviewing it to see if there's anything you'd like to amend. Mari handed the contract to the woman beside her, Suzuki, apparently. As a junior staffer, Suzuki dutifully accepted the document, stood up, and placed it in front of Haruto before quietly returning to her seat beside Mari. Mari had initially expected that Haruto would bring someone along with him for support, but surprisingly, he had come alone. Watching the boy flip through the contract seriously, Mari remained calm. After all, she doubted a high schooler would truly understand all the legal jargon. Only 9% royalties. Just as she lowered her gaze to the paper cup in front of her, ready to patiently wait out his pretend reviewing, Haruto's question caught her off guard. She looked up at him, startled. Industry standard royalties are usually around 10%, aren't they? Haruto's sharp gaze met hers. His brow furrowed slightly. In his previous experiences, royalties had always floated between 10% and 12%. A figure under 10% he hadn't encountered that before. It seems Mimizu-kun has a good understanding of the industry. Generally speaking, royalties are indeed around 10%. However, as a newcomer who's not yet familiar with the market, it's typical for us to deduct taxes on your behalf. The 9% listed here is your net income, after taxes. No need. I have a tax consultant. I can handle that myself, so your company doesn't need to worry about it. Fuokamari met his steady gaze for a long moment, then silently smiled and nodded. She opened her own copy of the contract and made a quick note to adjust that clause. Very well. Mimizu-kun will handle taxes himself. Besides that, are there any other issues? Signing a contract was a serious matter. Handle it well, and it would work in your favor. Handle it poorly. Without answering immediately, Haruto continued carefully reading the contract. He started with the revenue split and breach of contract clauses, meticulously confirming the details before moving on to the rights and obligations section. His silent, focused demeanor drew Mari's gaze toward his profile, her eyes becoming slightly entranced. There are a few clauses that seem problematic. For instance, the exclusivity period, you're locking the rights for 2 years under your publishing house. Haruto's brows knitted together as he tapped the table lightly with his index finger, a serious look on his face. Mimizu-kun, you're still a newcomer, correct? Yes. He hadn't been one in his past life, but now, objectively speaking, he was indeed an unknown rookie without awards or notable publications, purely a nobody in the eyes of the industry. If Mimizu-kun were an award-winning newcomer, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You'd get the full 10% royalties and far better terms. But publishing a newcomer's work carries risks for us too. I hope you can understand that. Haruto closed his eyes for a brief moment, his expression calm. He flipped through the contract again, confirming there were no other glaringly unfair clauses. All right. Let's just adjust the royalties, then. Suzuki, prepare a revised contract. Understood. Without another word, the woman called Suzuki stood up and quietly exited the meeting room, leaving just Haruto and Mari inside. The room fell into a heavy silence. After Suzuki left, Haruto lowered his gaze and waited quietly, not sparing another glance at Mari. Meanwhile, Mari found herself studying the boy before her with growing curiosity. It was strange. He looked like an ordinary high schooler, yet during the negotiations, his calm and natural demeanor felt more like a seasoned professional than a naive beginner. Mimizu-kun. Does your family work in this industry? Haruto lifted his head slowly at her question, meeting her gaze for a moment before shaking his head slightly. No. By the way, how many copies are you planning to print initially? Since you're a newcomer with no prior publicity, we're estimating an initial print run of 6,000 copies. Mari's eyes flickered slightly under Haruto's calm stare. Pressing her lips together, she answered honestly. I'm sure Mimizu-kun understands. I do. New author, new book, there's a lot of risk. It's safer to start with a small print run and gauge market response before deciding whether to reprint. Perfectly reasonable. His blunt reaction made Mari frown slightly. She had been planning to gently explain the realities of the market to him, but it turned out he already understood perfectly. That saved her some effort, but it also deepened her curiosity about why he was so quick to accept the harsh reality without a hint of complaint. Selling hundreds of thousands of copies is something only top-tier authors achieve. For a newcomer, 6,000 is pretty decent. That said, will your company be handling any publicity? Of course. We'll promote it through our magazines, weekly publications, and media channels. Mari's response was serious. Haruto smiled faintly but didn't expect much. The room fell silent once more. Accepting reality and embracing reality, those were two very different things. Even though he kept his expression in check, Haruto couldn't help feeling a trace of dissatisfaction deep down as he quietly sat, thinking about other possible ways to boost publicity. Watching the boy sink into thought, Mari didn't say anything either. The room remained still until half an hour later, when the door opened again. Suzuki returned with 2 newly prepared copies of the contract, handing one to each of them. After carefully checking them over, both parties confirmed everything was in order, signed their names, stamped the papers, and rose to their feet. They exchanged a perfunctory handshake before Haruto took his leave from the publishing company. That boy. He looks so delicate and refined, but he's surprisingly cool-headed. If we held a signing event, I bet he'd attract a lot of female readers. Suzuki watched Haruto's departing figure and suddenly spoke up. Why don't we arrange a bookstore signing event for him? He's still a student, he probably won't have much free time. Besides, looks aren't everything. Ultimately, It's the quality of the work that matters most. Are you saying his work isn't good? It's acceptable. The quality's right on the average line. Even if it doesn't win a grand prize, it could still snag an excellence award or something. Well then. Mari packed up her things and walked out of the conference room without answering Suzuki's question, why she didn't seem particularly optimistic about that boy's work. Returning to her desk, she sat down heavily. A stack of unfinished work awaited her, and her face once again sank into deep, helpless resignation. Back to work. Meanwhile, leaving the publishing, Harut returned to his apartment. He tossed the contract onto his desk without a second glance and collapsed onto his bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. Somehow, even the familiar ceiling felt a little alien tonight. 6,000 copies. It's a little less than I'd hoped, but still. That should be around 300,000 to 400,000 yen. Earning that much in about a month wasn't bad. Lying still on the bed, Haruto let out a quiet sigh. Well, whatever. At least it's getting published. The rest is up to the market. Images of the girl he met that morning floated back into his mind. Slowly, he closed his eyes. Since the contract was already signed, Haruto informed Setsuna and Mai that very evening. Seeing how genuinely happy they were for him, he couldn't help but let go of his earlier hesitation over the 6,000 figure and smiled along with them. Had they decided the publication date yet? Mai asked, clearly interested. She still didn't know exactly what Haruto's story was about, and her gaze flickered subtly toward her daughter, a hint of curiosity stirring inside her. Not yet. They're probably still working on the cover design. I see. But it won't take too long. A month, maybe 2 at most. So, around June or July? More like July. There are still a few details left to iron out. Hearing his answer, Mai thought for a moment. 2 months didn't seem like such a long wait. She nodded, making a mental note to buy a few copies when the book finally came out to support him. No need to go line up at the bookstore. Haruto added with a smile. They'll be sending me some copies. Oh, I see. Mai blinked at him, tilting her head slightly with a puzzled look. You seem oddly familiar with how this works. I picked up a few things. Plus, I learned more today during discussions with them. Haruto explained with a calm smile, mentioning Mari's name casually. Hearing that, Mai's expression eased. She seemed to understand, and didn't press any further. Sitting quietly nearby, Setsuna watched her mother's reaction without a word. Then after dinner, she pulled Haruto aside into her room, leaving Mai alone in the living room. From within Setsuna's room, soft and ambiguous sounds began to leak out not long after. Even though Mai had mentally prepared herself, when it actually happened, a wave of helplessness and shame still crashed over her. She sat stiffly for barely 10 minutes before retreating silently to her bedroom, carefully shutting the door behind her. By the time Haruto returned to the living room from Setsuna's room, it was brightly lit and empty, a sight that gave him a strange sense of peace. With the publishing details settled, life for Haruto returned to a quieter rhythm. School during the day, writing his usual novels at night, and occasionally checking Mari's emails for updates, progress reports, cover drafts, things like that. Is the cover too minimalistic? Looking at the black and white design, alone, falling black speck representing the heroine, Haruto fell silent for a long moment and sighed. Do you have any suggestions or requests? Mari's reply came swiftly. After some thought, Haruto sent back his ideas. She didn't refuse. A day later, a new cover arrived. This time, following his suggestions, it felt far less oppressive, more comfortable, more in line with what he had imagined. Publishing? At the astronomy club, Haruto had originally gone looking for Ryo Futaba, but she wasn't in the science lab today. Instead, he found Koharu sitting by the window. The breeze from the open window caught the edge of her skirt, lifting it just enough to flash the white frills underneath. Haruto's sharp eyes caught the fleeting glimpse before trailing back up to her face. So the trips to the publisher were for your book? Koharu left the window and walked over to him. She stretched out her arms, like a child asking for a hug. Smiling faintly, Haruto scooped her up into his arms and sat down on one of the nearby chairs. His gaze drifted to the left wall, where, as always, dozens of photographs of him were plastered all over. No, wait, there were even more now. He sighed inwardly. He was used to this room by now. Still, noticing the change, he casually commented, maybe it's time to take these down. It could cause trouble if anyone sees them. This is the top floor. No one else comes up here. Koharu said. Still, just in case? Glancing down at the girl in his arms, Haruto tried to reason with her in a gentle tone. Koharu fell silent for a moment, then gave a small nod, seemingly understanding his concern. All right. I'll take them all home after school today. Honestly, he had hoped she would just destroy them, but... well, taking them home was at least better than leaving them here. When's the release date? There's still a bit of time. Probably July or so, before it hits the bookstores. Got it. Koharu nodded thoughtfully, committing the time frame to memory. She was already planning to have her father buy copies for everyone at his company, one for each employee, as a show of support for Haruto. What's the title? Not finalized yet, but if nothing changes, it'll be The Angel with a Stigma. Who's the angel? Tilting her head back to reveal her slender, pale neck, Koharu gazed up at him with her lively eyes, full of innocent curiosity. Haruto met her gaze briefly before looking away, falling silent for a moment. Then he smiled faintly and locked eyes with her again. Why didn't you come with me last weekend? I got caught by my mother and was grounded. Koharu admitted with a pout. Their eyes met. Haruto pressed his lips together to suppress a laugh, while Koharu simply nestled closer against him without a hint of blame for his amusement. Leaving the astronomy club, Haruto made his way back toward the classroom. Halfway across the campus courtyard, he ran into a familiar figure, Ryo Futaba, wearing her usual lab coat. Seeing Haruto, Ryo's eyes flickered briefly toward the direction he had come from. Club activities. Haruto nodded. Yeah, just came from the club room. Seeing Ryo standing in front of him, he was a little surprised. He hadn't run into her at the lab, but here she was, crossing paths with him on the way back to the classroom. You weren't at the lab? I wasn't at school this morning. I just got back around noon. I see. Remembering something Ryo had mentioned to him before, Haruto nodded in understanding. Just as he was about to chat with her a little more before heading back to class, Haruto noticed something. The girl in front of him suddenly lifted her hand and lightly wiped the corner of his mouth, a gesture so abrupt and unclear in meaning that it left Haruto blinking in confusion. Your lips. Lipstick. It's really obvious, you know. Tapping her own lip with her fingertip, Ryo said it calmly, her eyes steady as she looked up at the boy standing before her. Chapter 157, faltering before the elder sister raising his arm, Haruto lightly wiped the corner of his mouth with his fingertip. Glancing at it, he found a faint, glossy trace of lipstick. He didn't have to think too hard about where it came from. It was clearly left behind during his intimacy with Koharu at the astronomy club earlier. Thanks. No need. I have something to do, so I'll excuse myself. Ryo's gaze lingered on the mark on Haruto's face, her emotions a complicated tangle. She still remembered Haruto once telling her that his girlfriend wasn't attending Toyasaki. So then, whose lipstick was this? She could have fabricated some plausible excuse for him. Maybe he had clumsily applied lipstick for the first time, resulting in the messy smudge, but they were no longer children. Even Ryo knew that would be an act of self-deception far too naive. After letting her gaze rest on him for just a moment, she turned away, walking toward the laboratory. Left standing there, Haruto watched her retreating figure fade into the distance. Then, idly, he ran the tip of his tongue across his fingertip, tasting the remnants of the lipstick. Cherry flavor. Hey, Mimizu-kun, are you free after school? Later that afternoon, Haruto listlessly flipped through his textbooks, the pages fluttering under his half-hearted movements. His mind wandered as he stared out the window at the blue sky, thinking about what else he had left to do. The publishing deal had been settled, all that remained was to look forward to the release date. Resting his head on a single arm slouched across the desk, he wondered if he should start writing something new. It was at that moment a voice brought him back to reality. He lifted his head lazily and glanced at the girl standing by his desk. I could be free. Or not. Depends. What's up? It was Itsuki Nakano. Haruto vaguely recalled that the last time he helped the Nakano family with tutoring, Itsuki had seemed particularly unhappy with him. He couldn't imagine why she was suddenly approaching him now. His ambiguous answer made Itsuki frown deeply. If you're free, I'd like to talk with you. Alone. She didn't wait for a reply. Without another word, Itsuki turned and walked briskly back to her seat, leaving Haruto watching her retreat with mild confusion. Feeling the subtle stares of others falling on him, Haruto simply closed his eyes again, resting on his arm. Class ended. School was over for the day. Sorry, I've got something to do today. I won't be heading home with you guys. Itsuki, having packed her bag, said this quickly to her sisters before striding straight toward Haruto's desk. Before anyone could even ask what was going on, they could only watch in stunned silence as she stopped by Haruto's side. After exchanging a few quiet words, the two of them left the classroom together. Wait, did I just see Itsuki leave with Mimizu-kun? The ever-energetic Yotsuba stared blankly at their backs before swiftly turning to Miku, Nino, and Akika, who sat nearby, each of them frozen in place. You didn't see wrong. Miku said after a moment of stunned silence. But why? Why would Itsuki leave with Mimizu-kun? Everyone seemed to share the same question, exchanging looks but finding no answers. Nino's gaze fell on Akika, who was quietly lost in thought. Itsuki wouldn't do anything reckless. Miko finally said. Besides, we don't know the situation yet. Should we follow them? They haven't gone far yet. Yotsuba added urgently. If we hurry, we can catch up. But Akika silently packed her bag and walked out of the classroom without a word. I have other things to do. As for Itsuki, I'll stay out of it, Akika said as her figure disappeared through the door. Left behind, the three sisters looked at each other for a moment, but the nun made a move to follow. Eventually, they also packed up their bags and left. Strolling across the campus, Haruto walked side by side with Itsuki. Yet he couldn't help noticing how her gaze never once turned toward him, as if she wasn't concerned with his presence at all. It was absurd to think she might harbor any feelings for him. Though he didn't know the quintuplets very well individually, he understood their strong bond deeply. He couldn't imagine Itsuki trying to take advantage of Akika's moment of heartbreak. Where are we going? He asked. There's a restaurant just outside the school. Let's go sit there for a bit. Without elaborating further, Itsuki led the way. Haruto followed without complaint, and soon they arrived at a small diner. Nothing fancy, just a simple place frequented by students. There weren't many customers, mostly Toyosaki students in uniforms. Choosing a relatively quiet corner, they sat down. As soon as she settled into her seat, Itsuki opened the menu, flipping through it without so much as a glance in Haruto's direction. Waiter. After scanning the menu, she quickly rattled off her order, mostly familiar comfort foods like curry and meat dishes. Only after placing her own order did she seem to realize Haruto's existence again, belatedly lifting her gaze to him. Ah. Sorry. I forgot to ask. What would you like? She pushed the menu toward him. Haruto glanced down. The prices were just as modest as the restaurant itself, perfect for students with shallow pockets. Lemon water, please. He said. Nothing else? It's on me today. Itsuki looked at him, a bit surprised. No, just the lemon water is fine. Haruto, lacking much of an appetite, declined politely. The waiter, seeing there was nothing more, closed the menu and left to prepare their order. Now alone at the table, Haruto and Itsuki found themselves surrounded by the low hum of students chatting nearby. Without beating around the bush, Haruto leaned forward slightly, meeting her eyes. So, can you tell me what you wanted to talk about now? Their food hadn't even arrived yet, but Itsuki, clearly torn between her anticipation for the meal and the conversation at hand, focused her gaze on him seriously. She stared at Haruto for a long moment, silent as if choosing her words carefully. Is it related to Akika? Haruto asked. It's somewhat related to my sister. It's not entirely about Akika, but I am a bit concerned. I was wondering why your relationship with her suddenly turned so cold. Lately, she's been distracted and causing a lot of trouble at home. Itsuki explained, following up directly after Haruto's question. He had already suspected this meeting was connected to Akika. After all, there wasn't much that tied him to Itsuki, and the only topic they could realistically share was her. So why didn't you just ask Akika directly? Was it because we don't have a particularly close relationship, and even if you asked, it wouldn't feel awkward? So you came to me instead? Haruto asked. No. That's not it. Itsuki shook her head quickly. Even if I asked Akika, I probably wouldn't get a clear answer. I thought maybe by asking you, I could figure something out. So you're basically admitting this has to do with me? At his words, Itsuki fell silent, letting her lack of response serve as confirmation. Haruto didn't seem particularly bothered. He quietly watched the waiter place lemon water in front of them, thanked him, then turned his gaze back to Itsuki. Whether it really has to do with me, I'm not sure, Haruto said calmly. But if I had to guess, maybe it's because I told her recently that I have a girlfriend now. A girlfriend? Itsuki repeated the word slowly, her eyes wide as she stared at him. The confusion and surprise swirling inside her were almost visible. She furrowed her brows, bit her lip lightly, and looked completely lost. When had this happened? Who was it? When did Akika find out? And why had Haruto told her? Since she's not a student at our school, we don't really interact much. That's why nobody at school really knows about it. He added, lifting his glass and taking a sip through the straw. His explanation was brief, and notably, he skipped over the part about why he had told Akika specifically, something that naturally made Itsuki even more curious. She wanted to ask, but given her position, it felt inappropriate. The questions piled up in her chest, but none of them made it past her lips. I see. Itsuki finally said, deciding there was no point pressing further. She had gotten the main answer she came for. So, Haruto asked, any other questions you need answered? Not exactly questions. She hesitated, her voice lowering. There's something kind of troublesome that I wanted to ask you for help with. Originally, she thought it would be an easy request. But after hearing Haruto's unexpected revelation, her plan now felt awkward. Still, She couldn't think of anyone better. After a moment of silent struggle, she pushed forward. I was wondering if you could tutor me a little. She barely managed to get the words out, looking at him like a nervous kitten. Tutoring? Haruto blinked, genuinely surprised. He hadn't expected that at all. His expression grew complicated as he leaned back, thinking it over. Itsuki sat quietly, anxiously waiting for his reply. Why me? There are plenty of classmates who have better grades than I do. He pointed out. Well, us sisters mostly stick together. We don't have close ties with many people in the class. It feels awkward asking someone I don't really know. Itsuki explained. Besides, you already helped us once before. And you have a girlfriend, right? Haruto paused, almost laughing. So having a girlfriend was a plus in Itsuki's eyes? There are a lot of smart people. She went on, but that doesn't mean they're good at teaching. You explained things really clearly last time, and I could actually understand it. That's why I want to ask you. She hesitated again, clearly worried about imposing. Of course, I understand this might be inconvenient for you. I'm not asking for daily tutoring, just occasional help when I get stuck. As for payment. She trailed off, looking frustrated. It was clear she had no idea what would be appropriate compensation for tutoring. I understand, Haruto said suddenly, before she could overthink it any further. His quick answer surprised Itsuki. She stared at him, unsure what exactly he meant. I'll tutor you, he said, smiling slightly. Instead of payment, let's call it a favor. 1 tutoring session equals 1 future favor you help me out when I'm in a pinch. We'll meet here. Is that okay? Meeting Itsuki's wide, puzzled eyes, he added, if we met at your house, it would probably just cause more trouble, right? It's not that big a deal. But yeah, here's better. Itsuki agreed quickly. Public spaces avoided any misunderstandings. She hadn't expected it to be so simple. After a beat, she asked cautiously, when you say favor, what kind of help are you talking about? Let's be clear, I won't agree to anything weird. I haven't really thought about it yet, Haruto said, still smiling. When the time comes, I'll let you know. It won't be anything crazy. And if you don't want to, you can say no. Alright, she said, a bit unsure but accepting it. They spent a little more time discussing the details, how often they'd meet, what topics to focus on, and also chatted briefly about Akika's recent behavior. Throughout the conversation, Itsuki kept trying to probe for details about his girlfriend, but he skillfully dodged every question. Eventually, her food arrived. Seeing that there was nothing else to discuss, Haruto stood up to leave. Alright. It's settled, Saturday afternoons, here. Got it. Itsuki nodded. Waving casually, Haruto left the restaurant, heading back to his apartment. Left behind, Itsuki quietly watched his retreating figure. Then, ignoring the curious looks from nearby diners, she turned her attention to her meal and began to eat alone. When she returned to their apartment, Itsuki stepped inside and immediately spotted Yotsuba alone in the spacious living room, sprawled across the sofa. She was lazily flipping through a manga, occasionally tossing a potato chip into her mouth. Hearing the door, Yotsuba lifted her head slowly and spotted Itsuki coming in. Ah, welcome back, Itsuki. Yeah, I'm back. Where is everyone else? They're mostly in their rooms. Nino's getting dinner ready, it should be done pretty soon. I'll pass. I already ate out earlier. I'm just going to head to my room after this, so no need to call me for dinner. Having already eaten more than enough at the restaurant, Itsuki now felt uncomfortably full. Trying to cram any more food into her stomach felt less like eating and more like... well, she didn't even want to think about it. Just imagining it made her stomach churn slightly. Shaking her head, she turned toward the stairs, ready to retreat to her room. Wait a second. Just as she turned around, Yotsuba, who had been slouched on the sofa, suddenly sat up straight and leaned forward, calling out to stop her. What is it? Itsuki asked, glancing back over her shoulder. You left school with Mimizu-kun today, right? There was no use denying it, they had left together right in front of everyone. Itsuki simply nodded, admitting it openly. So what? What did you two talk about? Yotsuba asked, her eyes shining with curiosity. Facing Yotsuba's eager gaze, Itsuki hesitated for a moment, then decided to share half of what had happened that afternoon. I asked if something had happened between him and Akika. He gave me a pretty unexpected answer. An unexpected answer? If you're that curious, why don't you ask Akika or Mimizu-kun yourself? Itsuki said, her voice calm as she turned back toward the stairs. I'm heading to my room. I need to rest. Chapter 158, Stop making those weird noises. The slogan for that thing was an irresistibly rousing flavor. It was just a hot dog dyed in the colors of ketchup and mustard, wrapped gently in a golden brown bun, with a sprinkle of fresh green lettuce priced at 198 yen. It wasn't expensive, but to Haruto, it tasted utterly mediocre. A thick bun with a single sausage inside, nothing more. Sure, it did the job if you just needed to fill your stomach. But for Haruto, who would be eating dinner soon after returning home, there was absolutely no need for it. He wasn't remotely interested in an irresistibly rousing flavor. The moment he saw the convenience store clerk, cheeks flushed red, trembling as she whispered the promotional line and bagged the hot dog, he suddenly felt a spark of interest. He walked up to the counter, ordered one hot dog and, just for the hell of it, also pointed at another item called a pillar of delicacy. Watching the clerk's reaction was almost magical. She was so embarrassed that her face nearly disappeared into the collar of her shirt, which looked like it was about to pop its buttons. Thank you. Your irresistibly arousing flavor. And your pillar of delicacy. Satisfied, Haruto took the hot dog and sausage and left the shopping arcade. Hey, Haruto. If you became a dad, would you prefer having a daughter or a son? He was just about to internally sigh over how Sekai's fashion was getting more and more mature, shifting from plain cotton clothes to lots of black and purple lace, wishing she'd returned to her simpler roots, when she suddenly dropped that bomb of a question, leaving him frozen in place. His gaze slowly drifted downward to Sekai's flat stomach. The serious expression on her tightly knitted brows and narrowed eyes made her question sound anything but casual, and even Sekai herself fell silent under his heavy stare. Are you pregnant? The weight of his voice hit her full on, causing her playful smile to vanish instantly. Sekai shook her head quickly, a little intimidated by the serious side of Haruto. No. I was just asking randomly. I just wanted to know if you'd prefer a girl or a boy. His suspicious gaze lingered on her for a moment longer. Seeing no sign she was hiding anything, he finally relaxed a little. He picked up his clothes from the floor and made his way toward the bathroom, answering her as he walked. If it's about my family's expectations, then they'd probably want a boy. But personally, I'm not too hung up on gender. Boy or girl either is fine by me. At the bathroom door, he casually tossed his clothes into the laundry basket, then doubled back to the living room. He pulled a random shirt from his closet, threw it on, and went to sit by the bed, where Sekai was waiting, her full attention still on him. But right now, I don't plan on having kids. Sure, I can take care of myself. But raising a kid? That's a whole different level. I don't want to bring a child into the world without being able to guarantee them a proper life. You're really responsible, Haruto. And you really don't care if it's a boy or a girl? Sekai looked a little surprised. Even she knew that most people naturally wished for sons. Boy or girl, it doesn't matter. What matters is how they're raised. If the parents mess up, it doesn't matter what gender the kid is, they'll still be a mess. Haruto's depth of thought stunned Sekai. She hadn't even considered things that seriously herself. Watching him, she got a little lost in admiration, staring at him longer than she realized. That's such a unique answer. Most people our age wouldn't think that far ahead. Haruto, did you ever think about that stuff with Satsuna, too? Her words trailed off awkwardly before she could finish. In Itamori, life was pretty dull. If I wasn't watching TV or reading, I was just staring at the sky. There was nothing else to do but think about the future. And seeing the ups and downs of the people around me. Well, it kind of forced me to grow up. HSS calm gaze held Sekai's without flinching. He wasn't bothered by the post-conversation atmosphere. He answered her with the same steady patience. Unlike his usual casual replies, maybe. Could be. Who knows? Or forget it, today he was different. Clear. Focused. Observing people around you, huh? Sekai murmured thoughtfully, her curiosity about the place Haruto grew up in deepening. Haruto simply turned back to his desk, pulled out a stack of manuscript papers from a drawer, and began writing again. At this point, trying to rely on Angel with a stigma name to boost his income was basically hopeless. The initial print run was only 6,000 copies. Unless a miracle happened, he had no chance of hitting the bestseller levels. Even hitting 20,000 copies would be a miracle in itself. So, he could only fall back on his main job. Even if he was growing tired of writing erotic novels, it was undeniable, they sold. 7 to 80,000 words was enough for a release, and a catchy title could guarantee a bump in sales. It was the best way to make money, and with his experience, he had a whole template ready to crank out 2 or 3 books a month, no problem. A paperback edition sells for around 700 to 800 yen. Based on his past experience, he had a rough idea of the sales and income he could expect. The real hurdle was negotiating with the publishers, and he was still underage. Even though Mai had agreed to help him handle it, he still felt a little guilty burdening her, given her own busy work schedule. Still, if they went under Mai's name, With Haruto handling negotiations directly, it might work out. As he sat at his desk, deep in thought, Sakai emerged from the bathroom, fully dressed. She walked over to him, peeking at the manuscripts scattered across his desk. Is that your new book? It's something I started before, but put on hold when I got a new idea. Now that the other project's done, I'm back to working on this one. I've got about 50 or 60,000 words so far. 50? 60,000? Sakai's eyes widened at the hefty stack of paper. Compared to her own 600 to 800 word scribbles, Haruto's output was on another level. Just writing a few hundred words was exhausting for her. Thinking about tens of thousands made her dizzy. These sound effects. They're kinda weird. What's this even about? Dream whispers. Haruto said casually. Setting his pen down, he slipped the manuscript back into the drawer. Then he reached out, plucked a little ball of hair from her hairline, and tossed it into the trash. I'm heading over to Setsuna's place. Wanna come? It's almost time for me to go home. Picking up on the hint in his words, Sakai tactfully said she'd head back. She leaned forward, closing her eyes. Chew. After a quick kiss, she left, looking satisfied. Haruto watched her go, then sat back down and pulled the manuscript out again, deep in thought. I really need to buy a computer. It's just too inconvenient without one. After a brief silence, Haruto shoved his manuscript back into the drawer, stood up without a word, and left his apartment. His destination, the Kaora household. You keep acting like you want to keep your distance from me at school, but you're perfectly fine getting close to everyone else. Don't you think that's a little unfair? Dragged up to the rooftop, Haruto sighed and sat down on a bench. His gaze drifted lazily not at the blonde twin-tail girl in front of him, but past her long, slender legs. He stared through the gap between her black stockings and short skirt, off toward the rooftop's green safety netting, clearly not paying her any real attention. Airi had once been so different. Now, seeing Haruto like this so far from the boy she thought she knew, she felt a strange discomfort. She took a step closer, grabbed the collar of his uniform, but Haruto just casually brushed her hand away. It's not like I'm being that close with anyone, he said. You're having lunch with that so-called genius girl in the lab every day. That's not close. We just chat. Pure, innocent conversations. Don't make it sound so dirty. Airi gave a hollow laugh. Oh please. When I tried to see you as some pure, innocent boy, you went and did what you did with my mother. You do remember that, right? Hearing that, Haruto could only sigh. He looked up at her, at the girl towering over him, and raised his index finger, wagging it lightly. Back then, Sayuri was single. I was single. A single man falls for a single woman. What's wrong with that? Saying what you did to Sayuri, that's not just insulting me. It's insulting her too. Yeah, well, falling in love with your classmate's mother isn't exactly normal, you know. Can't help who you fall for. Then why are you dating other women now? Haruto stared at Airi with a strange look, a small, knowing smile creeping onto his face. Airi realized too late she'd just said something she shouldn't have. Would you rather I got back together with Sayuri? Haruto asked, voice low. Go back to the kind of relationship you really don't want to see? That's not what I meant. My father would never approve of me and Sayuri. No matter how much we reminisce about the past, it wouldn't change a thing. And if you're suggesting we relive everything that happened. He let the words hang. You know that's not what I'm saying. Yeah, I know. But what's the point? Even if I got together with you, what would change? Airi bit her lip hard, glaring at Haruto. The old anger had faded long ago. What was left was a messy tangle of emotions that even she couldn't fully untangle. You don't even know what you want yourself, do you? Haruto stood from the bench without waiting for an answer, heading toward the rooftop stairs. Without another word, he disappeared from sight. When he stepped back into the classroom, a few curious glances turned his way. It wasn't exactly a secret anymore that Airi had feelings for him. But even so, nobody could quite figure out what their relationship really was, and Haruto's love life remained an unsolved mystery. The few people who did know weren't the kind to gossip. Does Sakura publish erotic works? Huh? Haruto's sudden question caught Mari completely off guard. They had just finished discussing the final details of his manuscript when he dropped that bombshell, and she blinked in stunned confusion. Canon? She guessed uncertainly. No, the other kind of adult content. Haruto clarified with an utterly serious face. What? Hold on, Mimizu-kun, you're still a minor, aren't you? Once she realized Haruto was indeed talking about that kind of adult material, Mari felt her head spin. This boy, who always seemed so calm and mature for his age. How could he be casually asking about something like this? Maybe I just have a talent for it. Haruto said nonchalantly. No. That's not something you're supposed to have talent for. Publishing explicit content for minors is illegal, a crime, you know. I'm not selling it. I'm creating it. Selling is your job, isn't it? Well, technically, yes. But still, you're a minor. And for you to even be able to create something like that, I have a girlfriend. Ah. I see. That's, good for you. His simple statement nearly broke Mari's already fragile defenses. She had been using work to numb herself all year, trying to ignore the looming threats of matchmaking and marriage her parents kept bringing up every holiday. Thankfully, her years of corporate survival kicked in, and she managed to maintain a strained smile as she answered, "The thing is, Sakura Publishing doesn't deal with that kind of content. We handle normal publications, yes, but adult works are outside of our scope. Even if you were eligible, we wouldn't have a way to publish the kind of material you're talking about. It's a profitable market though. You sure you don't want to set up a subsidiary just for it? That's up to the higher-ups to decide. As an editor, I have no say in that kind of management decision." "Alright then. Well, best of luck with your promotion, Kazekage-san. Anything else we need to go over?" "No, that's all. Bye-bye." After hanging up, Mari stared at her phone for a moment, lost in thought. She replayed her conversation with Haruto in her mind, still doubting, was he really just a high school student? Erotic fiction. She understood well enough that there was serious profit to be made in that field. But sadly, it clashed with the philosophy behind running Sakura Publishing, and they had no intention of venturing into that side of the industry. What a waste. She sighed. Meanwhile, Haruto, who had stepped outside for the call, returned to the restaurant. He spotted Itsuki at the table, frowning deeply as she stared at her workbook, and quietly took a seat across from her. Without a word, he sipped his lemon water and casually flipped open the book he had brought with him. Itsuki, her brows furrowed tight in frustration, had been stuck on the same problem for a long while now, unable to find a solution. When she glanced up and saw Haruto sitting across from her, leisurely reading as if he hadn't a care in the world, a surge of indignation welled up inside her. Why can he solve it so easily, when I'm sitting here completely stuck? Gritting her teeth, Itsuki lowered her head again, stubbornly attacking the problem. Without realizing it, she began letting out little frustrated sounds in and up, completely oblivious to how she sounded. From Haruto's perspective, it felt eerily like sitting in a public restroom while the person in the next stall was struggling. He actually started feeling the urge to go to the bathroom himself. Sighing lightly, he looked up from his book at Itsuki. Sensing his gaze, Itsuki snapped her head up, eyes wide with alarm, and stared at him fiercely. "What?" she demanded. "Nothing." Haruto replied calmly. "Just thought I should let you know you were making some pretty weird noises." "Weird noises?" she echoed, confused. Instinctively, she glanced around the restaurant. It wasn't a busy time of day, so the place wasn't packed, but there were still a few customers here and there, and sure enough, a couple of them were sneaking glances at her table. Realizing this, Itsuki's cheeks flushed a vivid red, and she hurriedly ducked her head. "If you hit a problem you can't solve," Haruto said casually, "it's okay to skip it. No point wasting too much time. Exams aren't going to give you all the time in the world. Your friends might lie to you sometimes, but math won't. If you don't know it, you just don't know it." Chapter 159, Just leave her a note. Sitting at the table, her mind foggy from staring at the test questions, Itsuki finally gave up. She set aside the pen she had barely used, grabbed her juice, and took a long, desperate sip. Across the table, she looked at the boy who still had his head buried in a book. "Ah. You're still reading? Is that book really that interesting?" she asked. Hearing her voice, Haruto slowly lifted his head. His gaze drifted over the top of the book and met hers directly. He casually slipped a bookmark between the pages and closed the book with a soft thud, then glanced down at the workbook in front of her. About 70 to 80% was filled in, but the rest remained blank. "Finished already?" "Yeah. I can't do the rest," she admitted, a little sheepishly. Setting his book down flat on the table, Haruto stood and walked over to her side. His eyes fell on the messy workbook as he leaned down slightly to get a better look, bringing his body unintentionally close to hers. Itsuki could feel his presence all too clearly now, the way his warmth brushed against her shoulder. Her eyes instinctively flipped sideways, and her gaze landed on the smooth curve of his neck, the subtle lines of his collarbone, and the faint glimpse of skin peeking out from his shirt. Her cheeks flushed pink. She hurriedly turned her gaze away but couldn't resist stealing another glance at his delicate, handsome profile. "Here. What are you looking at?" Haruto asked, noticing her wandering gaze. "Huh? And nothing," she stammered, eyes darting away in panic. Seeing her flustered reaction, he didn't press. He simply assumed she had gotten distracted and bent down again to explain the problems to her. In the quiet restaurant, the two young students, one explaining, the other listening attentively, painted an unexpectedly harmonious picture. Even the waiter, passing by and catching sight of them, couldn't help but smile faintly, remembering their own lost youth. So he's just helping her study, huh? I thought maybe it was something more. Guess I was worried over nothing. One waitress murmured to herself, chuckling. Meanwhile, back at home, Nino had noticed her sister's odd behavior lately. When she saw Itsuki rush out earlier, Nino's instincts kicked in. Quietly, she followed her. From their high-end apartment, Nino trailed her all the way to a simple restaurant near the school, where she spotted Itsuki sitting alone inside, clearly waiting for someone. Watching from outside at first, Nino's eyes widened when she saw Haruto arrive and join her sister. Startled, she hurried into the restaurant as well, choosing a secluded corner seat where she could watch them without being noticed. She couldn't help but suspect was something going on between Itsuki and Haruto. Had Itsuki betrayed the sisterly bond they shared? Was there some secret relationship between them? But then, she watched as her sister pulled out a thick study workbook and placed it on the table. Even though Nino had a slight problem with her eyesight, thanks to her glasses, she trusted what she was seeing. Still, even knowing that, it was a huge shock. Of all things, studying with Mimizu-kun? Memories of the last time Akiko had invited Haruto over for study help flashed through her mind. Nino frowned in deep confusion, stealing glances at the two as they worked. After a moment, she took out her phone and quietly snapped a photo, saving it without comment. Then she lowered her head, pretending to look at her phone, but continued to keep a cautious eye on them. Was it really just studying? Do you get it now? Haruto asked after a while, straightening up. I think I kind of get it. Itsuki replied a little awkwardly. He had expected her to say, I still don't understand, and was briefly caught off guard by her answer. Looking down at the girl sitting by his side, smiling awkwardly, he let out a small sigh. Want me to explain it again? No, it's fine. I basically got it. If there's anything I'm still confused about, I'll look it up when I get home. Itsuki knew she wasn't naturally gifted academically, but her work ethic had always been second to none. During Haruto's explanations, she had quickly scribbled down notes, capturing the key points as he spoke. Seeing her determination, he gave a small nod and returned to his seat across from her, picking up his lemon water and taking a slow sip. Anything else you need help with? He asked. Not really. Language arts isn't my best subject, but I'm at least passing. As for English, I'll pass on that for today, Itsuki said, waving it off. Then, tilting her head slightly, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, she added, actually, I'm more curious about something else. Shouldn't your girlfriend be messaging you or something? That's not really tutoring related, is it? Haruto replied, raising an eyebrow. I'm just curious, she insisted. Most boys who have a girlfriend would be glued to them, right? You're just calmly studying here. You haven't even checked your phone. Doesn't she care? Meeting her inquisitive gaze, Haruto chuckled a little. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and checked the screen. There was no message from Setsuna, but 2 emails from Sekai had popped up. She does care, Haruto said simply, but it's not a problem. She trusts me. Wait. So you didn't tell her about today? Nope. Itsuki's face showed a surprised expression, but the next moment, she realized that perhaps it really wasn't convenient to tell one's partner about such things. Still, the fact that Haruto was hiding his relationship from her felt somewhat inappropriate. If she were to get a boyfriend someday. Her thoughts drifted completely off topic, away from the original conversation. Well, since there's nothing else, I'll be heading back. Haruto placed his hand on the book in front of him, preparing to stand up and head back to his apartment. For him, staying here any longer served no purpose, better to return and continue working on his unfinished project. Is there something urgent? Itsuki asked. Not really. It's just staying here any longer feels pointless. It could get troublesome if someone sees us, right? I guess you're right. Itsuki nodded. Even if she went home now, there wasn't anything special waiting for her. The real reason she struck up this conversation was simply to fish for some information about Haruto's girlfriend, to see if Akiko still had a chance. But now that she thought about it, talking about this here really wasn't a good idea. If someone overheard a few stray words and started spreading rumors, it would only cause trouble. Oh right, I almost forgot, let's exchange contact info. It'll make it easier to get in touch before tutoring sessions. Sure, I don't mind. Haruto entered her contact information and saved it. Name, Itsuki Nakano. Casually adding her number into his directory, Haruto politely excused himself, grabbed his book from the table, and left the restaurant. Just before stepping out, he tilted his head slightly toward a certain gaze he had sensed. Noticed me, huh? Sitting quietly in a corner, Nino quickly lowered her head and retracted her gaze. Standing by the entrance, Haruto glanced at the familiar figure tucked in the corner. Recognizing her unmistakable features, he couldn't help but smirk slightly. Without saying anything, he pushed open the door and left the restaurant. A long while later, Nino slowly lifted her head, realizing he hadn't come over, he had already disappeared from sight. Silently, she rose from her seat without speaking to Itsuki and slipped out of the restaurant. "Haruto, where are you?" "Just hanging out with a classmate. I'm heading home now." "What's up?" "Nothing special. I just didn't know what to do this afternoon and I kinda wanted to see you." Hearing the hopeful tone in Sekai's voice, Haruto, now walking outside under the bright blue sky with white clouds drifting lazily overhead, lifted his gaze thoughtfully. "This afternoon, huh? Are you free tonight?" "Tonight? Yeah, I am. Tell your mom you're staying over at a friend's place. That won't be a problem, right?" Last time. She misunderstood and thought I was already dating you. So, it should be fine if I tell her." Listening to her halting explanation, Haruto recalled the awkward incident at Sekai's home. Although a bit unexpected, it wasn't entirely surprising. He nodded lightly. "All right, understood. Just let her know. By the way, she's not going to follow you over, is she?" Suddenly recalling what happened between himself and Mai in the past, Haruto grew a little cautious. He also remembered that Sekai, like Sayuri and Ariri, came from a single-parent household. No. Mom comes home really late every night. And when she does, she's too exhausted to care about anything. I just need to leave her a note." "I see. Then it's settled. Come over in the evening. I'll need some time to rest when I get home." "Saving your energy?" Walking along the road, Haruto froze for a moment, coughed lightly, and casually replied. "Something like that. Anyway, I'll hang up now. See you this evening." "Okay." Haruto soon stepped into a nearby convenience store and gave the familiar clerk girl a small smile. He wandered the aisles, grabbing some basic seasonings and instant food before heading to the counter. There, he casually picked up a small shiny box and placed it on the counter. The clerk girl, used to seeing him by now, stared at the small box without much expression. She couldn't even remember how many times she had scanned that item for him. 1,415 yen. Haruto handed over some bills and coins, chuckling slightly when the clerk quickly tossed the coins into the cash drawer as if they were contaminated. Grinning, he grabbed his shopping bag and left the store. Watching his back as he disappeared, the clerk girl bit her lip unconsciously. Did he really need that many? In just over a month, he had already bought how many boxes? She couldn't understand it. Was he using them to blow up balloons or something? Biting her lip harder, she pushed the thought away and quietly went back to her work. Even after returning to his apartment, Haruto couldn't help but chuckle at the memory of the clerk's expression. He tossed the shopping bag onto his desk, casually tore open the shiny box and threw it into his drawer, then carefully arranged the seasonings on his kitchen counter. Finally, he made his way over to the fridge and checked the supplies. Nothing urgent to replenish for now. 15:34. There was still a long stretch of daylight left. It was May, unlike the darker months of February or March, when the sky would already darken by 5 p.m., in May, twilight only began around 6 p.m., and full darkness came closer to 7 p.m. With plenty of time left, he sat quietly at his desk, pulled out his manuscript from the drawer, and stared at it in deep thought. Originally, he had planned for the protagonist to stay in the countryside and drown in sweet pleasures. But after completing The Angel with a Stigma, Haruto felt that kind of ending was just too mediocre. Sure, it could happen in reality, but art should draw from reality and rise above it. Maybe have them stand on the cliffside with his cousin and do a double suicide? A little homage? It felt too sudden. There wasn't any proper build-up earlier. Trying to shoehorn it in would just waste readers' time. Besides, he still had plans for this pen name, best to keep it intact for future releases. Forget it. I'll stick to the original storyline. But I'll scrap the whole mountain forest sex scene, no point dragging it out. Now that his creative passion had cooled off, Haruto didn't bother plotting anything new. Closing his eyes to visualize the next scenes for a moment, he picked up his pen and lazily began drafting the ending, relying on his old routine template. Late night, 10 o'clock. Leaving the remaining work to the store staff, Yoko Sei-ing also changed into her usual clothes, bid farewell to her employees, and made her way alone to the parking lot. Sliding into her car, she headed back toward her apartment. The lights aren't on. Well, around this time, she's usually already resting anyway. Lifting her gaze toward her apartment building, Yoko thought of her daughter, guessing she must already be asleep by now. She climbed the stairs slowly and made her way to the door of her unit. She slid the key into the lock and opened the door, stepping into a home enveloped in darkness. Normally, there would be at least one small light left on. Tonight, there wasn't even that, which struck Hueco as a little odd. At the entrance, she slipped off her shoes, her feet sliding easily into her house slippers. Without noticing the small note resting on the table, she walked straight toward her daughter's room. Standing at the door, she gently pushed it open and peeked inside. "Sekai. Are you asleep?" The light from the living room spilled into the bedroom, but the bed was completely empty. Hueco blinked in confusion, then pushed the door open wider and flicked on the bedroom light. Click. Under the bright light, the truth was clear, the room was empty. Her daughter wasn't home. A surprised expression crossed Hueco's face. She turned back toward the living room and finally noticed the small note sitting on the table. Picking it up and reading it over, her brows knitted together in surprise. "I'm spending the night at my boyfriend's house tonight. I'll be home tomorrow, so don't worry about me. Sekai say ing." The handwriting was unmistakably her daughter's. But her daughter was already bold enough to spend the night out? Hueco stood there in silence for a while, her face clouded with complicated emotions. It was probably that boy from last time. She pressed her lips together. Without even leaving a contact number, there was no way to reach Sekai now, nothing she could do. "I just hope they took proper precautions. Otherwise, if a child comes into the picture, it's going to be a real mess." Sigh. Sekai's really growing up, huh? Murmuring to herself, Hueco placed the note back down on the table and slowly made her way toward the bathroom. On a Saturday like today, the shop had been absolutely packed. After working for so many hours straight, she felt like her entire body was about to fall apart. Without a long soak, she honestly wasn't sure she'd make it through the night. "Doesn't your mom care?" "It's fine. But why are you suddenly asking about my mom?" "No reason. Just curious." "You're so cute, Sekai. Your mom must be beautiful too, right?" Lying in bed, Hueco say ing suddenly opened her eyes. She sat up, staring into the darkness of her bedroom. The dream she had just been having still lingered in her mind, fragments of conversation she couldn't quite grasp. A helpless, exhausted smile crossed her lips. Burying her face in both hands, she let out a long, heavy sigh. So lonely. Chapter 160. Yeah, I gave up. Morning light crept through the window as he slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was the girl still asleep beside him. Staring up at the wooden ceiling, his mind gradually emptied of any particular thought. He simply lay there, quietly resting, waiting for her to wake up. Half of her body was draped over him. His already lively body was further stirred by the faint fragrance coming from the girl sleeping next to him. His body instinctively tensed for a moment. Shifting his gaze to Sekai, who lay peacefully at his side, he closed his eyes again. Soft, even breathing brushed against his neck, her warm breath teasing his skin. The sensation made him squirm slightly, subtly turning his neck to avoid the ticklish airflow. Although half of his body was pinned down by her weight, his right arm was still free. Carefully reaching toward the pillow, he picked up his phone and glanced at the screen. 7:42 a.m. It was almost 8. Over at home, Satsuna had probably already woken up by now. Last night, it was close to midnight when he and Sekai finally fell asleep. After about 8 hours of rest, he felt fully recharged, unlike the girl beside him, who was still deep in sleep. A faint smile played on Sekai's lips, suggesting she was dreaming of something sweet. Just as he was idly wondering what she might be dreaming about, and whether it involved him, he suddenly heard her mumble softly, her voice barely a whisper. "MMH. Yeah. Haruto. Like this. In the room. Just me." The words were fragmented and incomplete, but the general meaning was unmistakable. Haruto's expression grew complicated as he looked at the sleeping girl beside him, feeling a dull ache in his jaw, almost as if from biting down too hard. Ding dong, the doorbell rang. Haruto glanced toward the entrance, then back at Sekai. Her peaceful expression suddenly tensed, her brow furrowing slightly. The hand resting on his chest unconsciously clenched his pajamas, right over a particularly sensitive spot, making him grimace slightly. Sighing, Haruto slipped his hand under the covers and gently hooked his finger against her hand. Instantly, Sekai stiffened and snapped open her eyes, her body going rigid as she looked around the unfamiliar surroundings. And then she saw him. Haruto. Still half lost in dreams, she had been hovering on the edge of waking for a while. It was just that the warmth of the bed had lulled her into staying under longer, until Haruto's playful nudge jolted her fully awake. Ding dong ding, ding, ding dong, the doorbell rang again, this time impatiently. Seeing that Sekai was finally awake, Haruto gave her a small smile before slipping out of bed, leaving her behind, red-faced and flustered, as he made his way to the door. Opening it, he found Satsuna standing quietly outside, dressed in a gray hoodie. Her gaze fell on Haruto, taking in the disheveled look, and then drifted toward the inside of the room. Spotting the pair of familiar shoes at the entrance, she looked back at him. Is that Sekai? Yeah. Come in. Without saying much, Setsuna stepped into the apartment. Haruto closed the door behind her. She immediately spotted Sekai sitting up in bed, clearly awake now. Morning, Setsuna. Normally, there would have been nothing special about greeting her like this, but under the current circumstances, with Sekai still sitting on Haruto's bed, the air was tinged with a palpable awkwardness and a hint of shame. It's already 8. You should probably get up soon. Setsuna's voice was even as she looked calmly at Sekai, then turned toward Haruto, who was casually changing in the living room, unbuttoning his sleepwear and slipping into a white shirt and khaki pants. And your mother? She should be home, right? It's the weekend. Haruto asked. She's in her room. Still asleep. Setsuna answered, we had a plan yesterday, but there was a little change. So she decided to rest today instead. A change of plans? He asked, buttoning up his shirt as he met Setsuna's eyes. Their eyes met briefly. He seemed to understand without needing any further explanation. Haruto wisely dropped the subject and instead asked casually if she had anything planned for the day. Glancing at Sekai for just a moment, Setsuna nodded. I want to go on a date. Just the two of us. Sekai, still fixing her tousled hair, heard those words and flicked her gaze toward Setsuna. But she said nothing, quietly pulling on her clothes. A date, huh? Haruto nodded. Sure. Let me get ready first. Oh, Sekai. I'll head home. Sekai said, cutting him off with a bright smile. I didn't check in with my mom at all yesterday. She's probably worried. You two should have fun. Waving her powered-off phone with a grin, Sekai finished dressing, quickly said goodbye, and disappeared out the door like a gust of wind. Haruto, who had already put on his clothes, turned back to Setsuna. I'll just wash up real quick, you wait for a moment. Okay. Spending about 10 minutes freshening up and tidying his hair, Haruto returned to the living room, only to find Setsuna standing by the bed, staring into the trash bin with a complicated look on her face. What are you looking at? He asked. Nothing. Setsuna turned her head slightly, her eyes darting away. She casually tossed a tissue into the bin, then walked toward the bathroom to wash her hands. When she returned, she glanced at Haruto, now in a crisp white shirt, green hoodie, and khaki pants, then looked down at her own simple gray hoodie. Her fingers fidgeted slightly. I want to buy clothes. Huh? Clothes. Matching yours. You mean couple outfits? Yeah. Her eyes stayed steady, but there was a faint tremor in them that made Haruto pause thoughtfully. All right. Let's go shopping for clothes today. He said with a soft smile. How about Harajuku? There should be a lot of good options there. Shinjuku had some places too, but Harajuku was the trendier choice, filled with stores popular among younger crowds. Setsuna gave a small nod. Okay. Setsuna didn't think much about the suggestion Haruto made, she simply agreed. Whether or not they could actually find clothes that suited them both wasn't something she was particularly concerned about. Her main goal today was just to go on a date with him, spending time alone together. Once they were ready, the two of them left the apartment. As soon as they stepped out the door, Haruto locked it behind him. Just as he slipped the keys into his pocket, he felt a slender hand wrap around his arm. Turning his head slightly, he caught sight of Setsuna beside him, clinging to him a little shyly. Haruto gave her a gentle smile, and together they made their way toward the subway station. When Mai woke up, it was already close to noon. Feeling satisfied after a deep sleep, she slowly opened her eyes. The room was dim, the curtains still drawn. She rolled over lazily, stretching her arms and twisting her neck a little before finally sitting up. She let out a long sigh, blinking sleepily as she climbed out of bed. Shuffling over to the window, she pulled the curtain open just a crack and peeked outside at the bright, cloudless sky. The weather's really nice today. But it's already so late, huh? Seeing the sun high up in the sky, Mai couldn't help but feel a little regretful. If she had woken up earlier, she might have gone out, maybe even joined Setsuna for a walk somewhere. It wasn't like it was too late to leave now, but somehow, it just didn't feel right anymore. Not like I have anything I have to do today anyway. Muttering to herself, she turned away from the window and headed to the door. Stepping out of her room into the quiet living room, she glanced around. Setsuna? Setsuna? Are you home, Setsuna? She called out 3 times but got no response. Walking over to the dining table, she noticed a breakfast plate neatly covered to keep it warm. Then her eyes drifted to the clock on the wall, and a numb expression spread across her face. It was already well past breakfast time, closer to lunch, really. There's a note too. What's on it? Noticing a small orange sticky note next to the plate, Mai picked it up and read it casually. Out on a date with Haruto. Please don't disturb. Just moments ago, She had been thinking that today's beautiful weather would have been perfect for a little outing, maybe even daydreaming about sitting side by side with Haruto at a shrine, watching a wedding ceremony in white kimono and black formal wear. But now that fantasy was completely shattered. And the one who shattered it was none other than her adorable daughter. Gone on a date with Haruto, huh? Must be nice. Sighing, Mai placed the sticky note back on the table. She reheated the breakfast Setsuna had left for her, ate quickly to fill her stomach, and was just about to head back to her room to sleep the day away again. It felt a little pathetic, but honestly, she couldn't think of anything else to do. Dragging herself back to her room, she sat on the edge of her bed. But no matter what, she just couldn't seem to lie down. Images of her daughter and Haruto happily walking together kept floating up in her mind, making her feel restless and a little bitter. She glanced over at her wardrobe. After a moment of hesitation, Mai stood up, quickly threw on some clothes, tidied up her appearance a bit, and left the house. Meanwhile, at a small restaurant downtown. You're already home? Okay, got it. I'm working at the shop right now, but if you need help with anything, come by later. Talk to you soon. Yoko Saying, busy at work, answered a sudden phone call from her daughter, who said she had already returned home. Still, Yoko was already busy handling the restaurant, so there wasn't much she could do at the moment. She decided she'd sit down and have a serious talk with her daughter after work. She was curious to know exactly how far things had progressed between her daughter and her little boyfriend. High school had only just started. While having a boyfriend wasn't exactly forbidden, Yoko still thought it was a bit too early to get serious. She'd need to give her daughter a little reminder. With that thought in mind, Yoko instructed the restaurant staff to do a thorough cleaning and prep for the lunchtime rush. As soon as the restaurant opened for lunch, the place became a whirlwind of activity. Table 17 ordered steak. Has the seafood fried rice for Table 7 finished yet? Almost done. Also, prepping the order for Table 21. The bustling atmosphere of the restaurant kept Yoko busy, and with that, she had no time to think about anything else. It wasn't until the busy lunchtime rush started winding down that she saw a familiar figure quietly seated in the corner, leisurely sipping coffee. It was a bit unexpected for her to appear in front of Yoko, but once she remembered that today was the weekend, Yoko understood. With no urgent tasks left to attend to and feeling that she could leave the rest to the staff, she walked over toward her. Well, what a cute lady. Here alone? Yoko addressed the woman and sat down across from her, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Are you alone too? Ah, not really. I have a lovely daughter. I do too. In fact, my daughter has an excellent boyfriend now. If it had been any other day, Yoko would have probably let the conversation end here and asked about Mai's reason for coming to the restaurant. But today. Funny thing, my daughter has a boyfriend now too. She even stayed at his house last night. If she graduates from high school, maybe they'll get married soon. With a wide smile on her face, Yoko looked directly at Mai, who was staring at her in surprise. There was no sign of hesitation in Yoko's demeanor. Your daughter has a boyfriend too? Of course. Do you think I'd joke around about something like this? Yoko waved to her staff, asking them to bring her a cup of coffee, and then refocused her attention on Mai with a soft smile. I haven't heard Setsuna mention anything about it. I only found out by chance. If I hadn't happened to overhear, I probably wouldn't have even known about her boyfriend. Mai noticed something odd. It felt like Yoko had deliberately omitted something important. She looked at the woman across from her, whose face was lit with an almost mischievous smile. Don't tell me you misunderstood something? Mai asked. What's there to misunderstand? Sakai herself admitted it. She even stayed over at his house last night. They're still in high school. Isn't that a little dangerous? Mai's tone sharpened slightly as she spoke. She and Yoko had both learned the hard way what trusting too easily could lead to, almost losing everything. Hearing that Sakai had not only gotten a boyfriend but stayed the night at his house made Mai deeply worried. Blood ties aside, Sakai and her own daughter had been inseparable since childhood. Mai had watched her grow up, and the idea of Sakai following in their own reckless footsteps was unbearable. I know. Yoko said with a soft sigh. That's why, when I get home tonight, I plan to have a serious talk with her. A waitress approached, setting a fresh cup of coffee in front of Yoko. Both women fell silent, knowing better than to discuss such private matters in front of others. Once the waitress moved away, Yoko leaned in slightly and changed the subject. So? It's your day off. What brings you here today? Nothing in particular. Sakai and her boyfriend are out shopping, so I had the house to myself. I figured I'd drop by and see you. There's not much to see. Yoko said, chuckling. Every day's pretty much the same for me. I don't even get proper holidays anymore. Couldn't you leave things to your staff? Mai asked. I wish. But there are still things they can't handle on their own. Sometimes troublesome customers show up too. If something goes wrong and I'm not here to manage it, it could turn into a real mess. It had taken Hueco a long time to build her restaurant up to where it was now. The thought of something ruining it was unbearable. That's why I have to stay here and keep an eye on things, she said firmly. Sounds exhausting. Mai sipped her coffee with a sympathetic smile. After the lunch rush, the restaurant had gradually quieted down. Hueco glanced around the room, then back at Mai, her tone turning casual. By the way, that boyfriend you once mentioned. Did you give up? It was a question asked almost absent-mindedly, but Hueco still remembered a conversation from long ago. Back then, she hadn't taken it seriously. Just the idea alone, considering their ages, and the fact that their daughters were already romantically involved with the same boy, was beyond absurd. This wasn't some ridiculous romance novel where such messy mother-daughter drama could happen. The moment the question left her lips, Mai paused mid-sip. She lifted her gaze and met Yoko's eyes. Calm, almost indifferent, she smiled softly and said, "Yeah, I gave up." Chapter 161, Really? I don't believe it. Had she truly given up? Looking at Mai, who sat across from her with a faint smile at the corners of her mouth, Hueco couldn't quite believe her words. Still, it wasn't really her business. Even now, she hadn't once seen the boy Mai spoke of, and Hueco wasn't the type to meddle in others' affairs. Is that so? Well, maybe it's for the best if you've given up. If you hadn't. If you'd kept holding on, and your daughter eventually picked up on something suspicious, it would have strained your relationship with her, wouldn't it? Turning her head slightly to glance out at the bright blue sky, Yoko's expression softened with a faint hint of resignation. Thinking about her own daughter Sekai, she couldn't deny that their bond had cooled lately. She was coming home later and later every day, and the distance between them had slowly but surely grown. Honestly, she hardly knew anything about Sekai's life anymore. If she hadn't come home early that day by pure chance, she wouldn't have even known her daughter had gotten a boyfriend. Whatever the case, for both of us, the only people we can truly rely on and trust are our daughters. Better not to let unnecessary things drive a wedge between us and the only family we have left. I've always understood that, Mai said quietly. That's why my daughter has always been so understanding of my struggles. Understanding of your struggles, huh? Hueco studied Mai's face, reflecting on how similar their lives were. Even though their incomes were enough to maintain their households, life was still relentlessly tough, juggling work every day with almost no time to breathe. If only Sekai could be a little more understanding, maybe I'd have an easier time too. Hueco muttered. Doesn't she often come to the restaurant to help you out? She's usually busy with school. It's only during vacations that she drops by once or twice. Hueco lifted her coffee cup, taking a small sip, her gaze lingering on Mai. They were close in age, shared similar hardships, and were even related by blood. Watching how they had both grown from carefree girls to women working tirelessly for the sake of their families and daughters, Hueco couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Have you ever thought about your own future? The sudden question made Mai, who was lightly massaging her slender neck with one hand, shift her gaze to Hueco. In what way? I mean, after all this, your daughter already has a boyfriend. After Mai graduates, gets married, and starts her own family. Have you ever thought about building a new life for yourself too? The idea caught Mai by surprise. She blinked, then gave a small, wry smile. Long ago, she might have had fleeting thoughts about such things. But that was before she met Haruto. After meeting him, and especially now that her daughter seemed to tacitly approve of their relationship, those old notions of rebuilding her own life with someone else had completely faded away. That child. She's incredibly thoughtful, Mai said. The boy who's dating my daughter. When he first started seeing her, and came over for dinner, he actually talked about the future. He said he wanted to buy a bigger house enough for the three of us. Him, my daughter, and me. All living together under one roof. The sunlight pouring through the window lit up Mai's face, making her smile seem so pure and radiant that it left Hueco feeling an ache deep in her chest. She was jealous. Forcing an awkward smile, Hueco lowered her head, staring into the dark reflection in her coffee cup. The three of you living together? I doubt I'll ever have that with Sekai. Honestly, she barely talks to me anymore. And in the future, we probably won't have much in common either. If we kept living together, it would just end up being nothing but tension and awkwardness. You don't have to be so pessimistic, Mai said gently, her voice filled with warmth. You might still meet someone good. Mai, who had already found her peace, offered those words with an easy smile. Hueco simply chuckled dryly and didn't pursue the topic any further. Whenever they talked about their own futures, the atmosphere inevitably turned heavy. For women like them, without finding someone reliable to lean on, loneliness seemed to be the only path ahead. Yoko's heart grew even heavier. Maybe it really was time for her to seriously consider finding someone who could be there for her in the future. When are you free? Mai suddenly asked. Well, I'm always busy, but technically, I can be free anytime. Yoko wasn't sure why Mai was asking out of the blue, but she still gave an honest answer. While she was constantly tied up with the restaurant's affairs, in truth, many things could be delegated to others if she wanted. So if she needed to, she could carve out some time. Next week, why don't we go out together? Just the two of us. Mai suggested. The two of us? Yoko looked at Mai in surprise but quickly nodded. Taking a day off wouldn't hurt. She could always close the restaurant for a day. No big deal. Sounds good. Let's do that the next weekend. It's been ages since I just relaxed, Mom. Just as she was about to ask where Mai wanted to go, a familiar voice rang out across the restaurant. Yoko looked up to see a girl approaching their table. Sakai. Oh, you're here. Yeah. There wasn't much going on at home, so I thought I'd drop by. Oh. Mai-san? Sakai blinked in surprise. She had been told not to call Mai auntie because it sounded too old, so she'd gotten into the habit of calling her more casually as Mai-san. It's been a while, Sakai. I haven't seen you around lately. Mai said with a smile. By the way, wasn't Setsuna with you? Setsuna's out on a date with Haruto. I see. Mai nodded casually, as if she knew nothing about it. But in her eyes, a glint of quiet calculation flickered as she looked at the girl standing by the table.